I'm going to go ahead and call this September 6, 2022 meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. We're both meeting in person as well as remotely via WebEx, so welcome to the folks that are not here in attendance this evening. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I would like to just, for the record, formally excuse Councilor Fury from the meeting this evening. And Heidi, I think I saw you. How about leading us tonight in the pledge, please? Thank you very much, Heidi, and thanks everyone for attending this evening. Our next item is item number 3, which is a council proclamation recognizing and supporting the right to personal autonomy and right to local control. For the record, this proclamation tonight is at the behest of 5 of 6 city councilors, including myself, and I would like to let the record reflect respectfully Councilor Caltabiano's opposition for the record. And I'll go ahead and read the proclamation now this evening, and you'll have an opportunity to comment at the next agenda item. Whereas Montana is one of the few states that constitutionally guarantees its citizens the fundamental right to privacy and recognizes such right is essential to the well-being of a free society. Whereas over 2 decades ago, the Montana Supreme Court expressly recognized the fundamental right to privacy encompasses the right to personal autonomy, including the right to make medical judgments affecting one's bodily integrity and health in partnership with a chosen healthcare provider, free from government interference. Whereas Montana adheres to one of the most stringent protections of its citizens' privacy rights in the United States, even exceeding that provided by the federal Constitution. And whereas, as authorized by the 1972 Montana Constitution, the city of Whitefish adopted its own charter to provide for local determination. Whereas, as a charter city, the city has broad powers and may exercise any power or provide any service except those prohibited by the Montana Constitution, state law, or the city's own charter. Whereas the city of Whitefish has been and will continue to be committed to the ideals of inclusion, equality, dignity, and personal autonomy, as evidenced by numerous proclamations, resolutions, and ordinances adopted by the City Council over the years. And whereas the United States Supreme Court has recently issued a decision crucially impacting the individual right to personal autonomy. And whereas the United States Supreme Court has recently issued a decision eviscerating local government control over issues of local interest and importance. And whereas the Whitefish City Council desires to reaffirm its commitment to upholding and protecting the fundamental right to privacy, including the right to personal autonomy established by the Montana Constitution and ingrained in Montana history and law. And whereas the Whitefish City Council strongly believes our local government is best able to assess the needs of our community and, in accordance with broad powers granted to charter cities, legislate in a manner most appropriate to meet those needs free of state or federal control. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed, the city of Whitefish repudiates the principles in the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision that undermine Montana's long recognized fundamental right to privacy, including the right to personal autonomy. The city of Whitefish repudiates the principles in the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision which undermine the authority of local governments to legislate on matters of important local interest and concern. And finally, the city of Whitefish reaffirms its commitment to recognizing and honoring the fundamental right to personal autonomy for every citizen and to proactively address at a local level issues that intimately affect its citizens' safety, health, and welfare. Thank you very much for listening and being respectful. I will now move on to our first presentation of the night before we go to public comment, and that will be item number 4, consideration to approve an application for the Smith Lake Public Recreation Use Easement and Restoration Project. And I believe Heidi's here with Whitefish Legacy Partners to present tonight. Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you all, councilors. Appreciate the invitation to come present to you and consider our application. And I'm so glad I have such a full room so you can all hear everything I have to say.
That's why they're here.
That's right. So my name is Heidi Van Everen. I'm the executive director of Whitefish Legacy Partners. Our office is located at 525 Railway, and we are a local nonprofit partnering with the city to accomplish the goals outlined in the 2004 Whitefish Area Neighborhood Plan, working to impact the 13,000 acres of public land surrounding our Whitefish community. It includes the development and management of the Whitefish Trail, outdoor education opportunities, and generating interest in conservation and supporting the health and well-being of our community. One goal is to seek creative solutions to balance the Montana School Trust Land state mandate to generate revenue with our community's desire for conservation, recreation, and permanent public access surrounding Whitefish Lake. Another goal is to create an outdoor recreation amenity for locals and visitors alike that's an economic driver for the city of Whitefish. So I'm here this evening because I would like to present information on our work known as the Smith Lake Legacy, specifically the Smith Lake Public Recreation Use Easement, or we call it the PRUE. We're asking for council support to resubmit a revised Smith Lake Public Rec Use application impacting 600 acres at the head of Whitefish Lake as presented and modified in your packet. I had 2 maps that needed to be updated, and it's in on your dais as well as in my presentation. I apologize for that. This application, if approved, will be submitted to the State Department of Natural Resources and Conservation in the Northwest Land Office. The maps that were modified are on page 3 and 6 and will be part of my presentation. So the application is a revision to the original right-of-way application that we submitted back in November of 2020. The revision drops the 16-foot trail easement between North Beaver and Swift Creek, and it increases the acreage of protected land surrounding Smith Lake and the existing Whitefish Trail at Swift Creek. We've been working steadfastly together with the state and through our collaborative committee, the Legacy Lands Advisory Council that Andy Fury and Steve Quinnell both sit on, including city staff, to ensure that we have the project and the application exactly as we would like it to be and to get approval. The work is complex, so I'm going to go back to 2004 and the Whitefish Area Neighborhood Plan to provide some context for the application and the community's vision for conservation and recreation, and also set the stage for the broad support for the project. The Whitefish Area Neighborhood Plan is a 20-year land use plan that outlines innovative land management strategies to reduce uncertainty for the state, enhance income to Montana schools and universities, and improve protection of important community land surrounding Whitefish Lake. The plan envisions stacked uses, including timber management, conservation easements, conservation buyer opportunities, public recreation, commercial recreation, leases, licenses, and roads. The work under the neighborhood plan is guided by the premise that all these uses are compatible and that ultimately they can serve each other. So after working for 18 years in partnership, it's clear, and we've proven, that the Whitefish Neighborhood Plan is a successful model both locally and statewide, and it's become a regional model. The vision has provided increased economic vitality for our community, the valley, and the school trusts, and it's allowed us to protect our open lands, our open views, and create the Whitefish Trail. Michelle, can you zoom out a little bit to see sort of the broader, just want to show, this is our Whitefish Trail map. And just generally, so Smith Lake is located at the north end of the lake. There's also another Smith Lake west of Kalispell, so we want to make sure everybody knows what we're talking about. Our state trust lands are shown in blue, our forest lands in dark green, our existing and future conservation is shown in purple. So currently the Whitefish Trail has been developed on the west side of the lake. It's a green solid line, Lion Mountain, Skiles, and Beaver, and on the east side with connections to Whitefish Mountain Resort through Haskell. Spencer Mountain is located to the south, also on state trust lands, and Swift Creek and Smith Lake to the north, currently with 3.5 miles of an out and back trail. So the Smith Lake public rec use easement in this application will surround Smith Lake and will offer concentrated new recreation opportunities around Swift Creek and Smith Lake. And hopefully you can tell from this map the importance also of the private landowners throughout the landscape, both in Haskell Basin in our work with Stoltz and throughout the Whitefish Trail, and then certainly in key areas at the head of the lake as we work to connect the Whitefish Trail and close the loop of the trail. Could you go to map 3? I didn't put them in order just to keep everybody on their toes. I apologize. So, and then maybe zoom out of the, perfect. So similar to 2014, the Beaver Lakes public rec use easement, this Smith Lake public rec use easement will remove development rights. Can you scroll down just a little bit? That's great, thank you. So the Smith Lake public rec use easement will remove development opportunities, it will provide permanent public access, and it will allow a variety of recreation improvements, including stacked loops and lakeshore improvements to support family-friendly, quiet recreation, enhance our conservation values, provide wildfire protection, wildlife protection, and clean water in Whitefish Lake. Go to map 2. I'll come back to this map, but. So this application includes more acreage than the previous application that we submitted in November of 2020. This has 600 acres shown in purple. And we are no longer including the trail easement connection across Swift and Lazy Creeks to North Beaver. As we review alternate routes for the Whitefish Trail corridor, this easement is not a priority now and has been dropped from the proposal. DNRC also requested that we include more acreage surrounding the existing trails at Swift Creek, and we've added additional acres to provide improved access to Swift Creek on the east side of the creek. We are hopeful that we will figure out how to connect back to North Beaver with a larger watershed project and up to Hell Roaring Basin through federal lands, but those will be future projects. The lands within the Smith Lake PRUE will continue to be owned and managed by the state. Timber will continue to be managed sustainably by the state, and the state will also manage commercial recreation in the area, including motorized access north up to Whitefish Lake, Werner Peak, Taylor Creek, and supporting summer access, winter grooming, and snowmobile use as it currently is. Funds generated from the purchase of the easement will support the schools and University of Montana, and specifically in this area, MSU and the School for Deaf and Blind. The public rec use easement funds will ensure the schools a reliable income year after year and in perpetuity. Submission of the application will kick off a long list of to-dos for the city and Whitefish Legacy partners. We will work together to secure easement terms that benefit the community and allow effective long-term maintenance and access for the public in perpetuity. Legacy partners will continue to serve as the community transaction partner to ensure the goals of the neighborhood plan are upheld. We will act as the project catalyst, and we will lead all fundraising and capital campaigns needed to fund the project. Fundraising will also ensure continued growth of our existing endowment held by the Community Foundation to support maintenance and operations on the Whitefish Trail. The big items include, the big items to work on include the survey, the appraisal, easement negotiation, and payment terms. The state will host public meetings over the next year to ensure the environmental review is current and that the public has an opportunity to voice their interest and their concerns. We will come back before you all again to present, before we present to the land board with actual details about the cost and other things that come up during the survey or negotiation or payment terms. So this is just the first, well, not the first, because we've been working on this for a long time. So we are still a ways from the finish line, but the application will launch our commitment to initiate the work and work toward the land board approval in October of 2023. The right-of-way application you'll see requires a surveyor signature, but the state understands that our survey is not yet complete they will accept our application as is, knowing that the survey will be submitted later this year. As the Smith Lake Public Rec Use easement progresses, we will continue to work with adjacent landowners to ensure connections both east and on the east and the west. So maybe you could go back to map 3, that larger, show you the perspective. So we are working to connect from Smith Lake up to the Forest Service in Hell Roaring, and we are also considering possible routes to connect to North Beaver. As many know, the route back to Beaver is complicated and a number of alternatives are under consideration. We're working with numerous private landowners, including BNSF, as we consider all the possibilities. The area is complicated, complex, and requires a great deal of consideration, including public and private input and support. The connections are important to our work, and they are all part of our larger Smith Lake legacy. They're just outside of this application tonight. So there's a few other connected projects that I think are important to bring your attention to that are sort of outside of our project. The state is considering a request from adjacent private landowners to gain access via new road, East Smith Road. And the adjacent landowner I think marked on here is Eagle Rock, Montana. Originally, the road was scoped by the state as a reciprocal access project with multiple landowners. It's now morphed into a 40-foot private driveway for 1 or 2 landowners that will also allow non-motorized public access and improved timber management for the state. The state will be initiating a revised scoping in upcoming weeks. Our trail goes through this same landscape, and this new road does affect our plans for the trail. So we've met on site and reviewed things over the years, and with careful trail planning and reroutes, and we do expect that the projects can exist cohesively on the landscape, and we remain hopeful that the state will uphold the vision agreed upon in the neighborhood plan to limit development to 6 home sites in the area. There's also been discussion over the years with a possible land exchange between the state and adjacent private landowners, including the possibility for a connection that's critical to the Whitefish Trail, and we all continue working together in hopes of keeping the projects coordinated, compatible, and again, following the community's vision. So I thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. It's a complex project, and we want to make sure people understand it. I hope that you are in support of submitting the application to protect 600 acres around Smith Lake. The application requires a signature and a $50 fee that Legacy Partners would be more than happy to pay. And then in the agenda item, the title mentioned a rehab project. So I want to also touch on that, but it is not connected to the same application and does not require a signature. Michelle, can you switch to the next 4th? So the state is considering a rehabilitation project at the south end of Smith Lake. The state hopes to restore trails sustainably and protect the earthen dam where Smith Creek drains south. The city and Legacy Partners are both willing to work together with the local Stillwater State Forest to develop a project to rehab the eroding trails and provide improved lakeshore amenities to support quiet, family-friendly recreation, including fishing, swimming, and carry-in boat access. So that's pretty much it, other than the only other thing to mention is September 6th, Thursday night at 6 p.m. We're going to be opening the newest section of the Whitefish Trail, and it's up the Big Mountain Road. It's called the Holbrook Overlook, and it's just below Elk Highlands, and we have 3.8 miles of new trail. And
September 6th is tonight.
Oh, September 8th. September 8th.
You're
Thursday.
missing it.
Thank you, that's right. We're really excited. It's our first project on Forest Service land, and it's going to be a wonderful addition to the trail. And if folks remember Holbrook Overlook before the Big Mountain Road was rerouted. It used to be a pretty special place, and so we're trying to bring that back. I'm happy to answer any questions or stop talking.
Thanks, Heidi. Any questions for Heidi? Steve?
Just a quick question, Heidi. So you're taking out the proposed connection from North Beaver Trailhead over to Swift Creek. That was in the initial PRUE for this section?
That's
and
correct.
That's going to be just a different project now?
Yep.
Okay.
Originally, we had included acreage and then a 16-foot wide easement, and that was controversial, and there's alternatives, and so we're looking at putting it in a future project and
Okay.
focusing on Smith Lake.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Heidi, thanks for everything, and please extend our appreciation to your board.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We will move on to communications from the public. We do have 4 public hearings advertised for this evening, so if you're here to speak to one of those individual hearings, now would be your opportunity. Otherwise, public comment, please. And for the record, your name and address, please.
Mr. Mayor, do we need a motion or to approve the application as submitted?
Do you need a motion, Heidi or Maria? Yes? Okay, I would entertain a motion, please. Thanks, Frank.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the application as presented.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. And now we will take public comment this evening. Name and address for the record, please, when you approach the podium. Any public comment this evening?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council and
Kristen?
people of Whitefish. I just would like to state that I am not in support of your actions to make a proclamation on behalf of the city for something that you have not polled the city for, and that certainly does not represent the population. These were your personal opinions, and you did no outreach to find out what your population is about. You've not reached out to your churches. You've not respected the people in this city that are faith-based, minority groups that have varying opinions than yours, but you made this proclamation on behalf of us. So I would like to state for the record, and you received my formal statement, that you do not represent me as a person of the city, and I think you have done something that is putting our city at risk to get attention, and that is not due to the city. This proclamation was made clearly out of your purview of power. Nothing that I've read says that you have the right to make a proclamation in response to a Supreme Court giving our state their rightful power to control this matter, this personal matter. You've used inflammatory language. It did not eviscerate anything. It gave the state of Montana control. So I would ask you to go back and read what this was about and recognize that you really outstepped your role in this city. And again, nowhere does it say that you should make a proclamation on these matters on behalf of our city. You've also put people who feel that abortion is against their faith and their personal opinions at risk. I've stood out with the people who are standing for life, and to see what it was like for them. They get spit at, they get cars swerved at them, they get yelled at, they get like the ugliest people lean out the window and flip them off and yell at them. And I spoke with the people who stand there every week since it opened, but going on 6 years, and they are loving people. And one of them is 80 years old, and he is standing there because he is an abortion survivor. He was supposed to be aborted, but a mishap happened that his mother was pregnant with twins, and they couldn't abort in prison twins. He is so thankful to be alive, and he is only standing there to tell the women who are thinking about going into the abortion clinic that in this city, there are free options for them to carry this child to term, and a church service, there's hospitals, there's people who will embrace them and help them. And he knows that if they go in that clinic, they won't get this story. And he's just thankful to be alive and just wants to love and embrace these moms. He's not doing anything harmful. But your statement, calling it eviscerating and a proclamation, is very confrontational and will put these people who stand there in love at risk. They're already treated poorly. And for you to grand stage this as if it's our city's opinion is wrong. It's not our city's opinion, it's your personal opinion, and it should not have been done on behalf of our city. So I would like you to consider retracting it and going back to look at what actually happened in that case, in that Supreme Court case, and reinvestigate your role. You do not have the role to speak on behalf of me about your personal opinions on this matter. Thank you.
I'm Mark Bray. I live at 111 Trails End Road up in Elkhorn. And you do have the right to speak for us because you're our elected officials. And that woman was giving her personal religious views, which is fine. But not everybody is religious in that way. And everybody has a right to choose for themselves. And what you were expressing is freedom for individual choice. And I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Just out of respect for those commenting tonight, if we can just refrain from clapping and applauding, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Tom Abshire. I'm at 520 Glenwood here in Whitefish. I'm the applicant for the Birch Hill Homeowners Association Park minor variance, and wanted to address some of the questions that come up within the revised staff report, specifically about navigation impingement of our variance or our dock extension. And so I can either provide that information now, show some images, or if it'd be more convenient, defer until Dave is ready to speak to the variance.
If you don't
address
mind,
those at that time.
I know it's going to take quite a bit of time to get there, but if you have the time this evening,
I'm happy to stay.
we'll address you at that point.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Margie Spencer. I live at 116 Wild Rose Lane here in Whitefish. Before I make my comments on the proclamation, I just want to say, Heidi, you rock. Whitefish Legacy Partners rocks, and the trails here are just phenomenal. And thank you for your support of those trails. With regards to the proclamation, I know there's been some concern that this proclamation is outside the scope of what we do in city government. And specifically, there's been code that's been cited that advises that we should be avoiding issues that do not uniquely affect our community. But Whitefish is home to one of only 5 healthcare facilities that provides a critical set of procedures that preserve women's health and reproductive rights. And that feels pretty unique to me. So I think, yes, it is part of our scope of responsibilities in city government. Secondly, I think we all kind of understand there's a little bit of symbolism with this proclamation, and whether or not it grants us more personal freedom, or whether or not it really results in the city governments being able to have more autonomous decisions, that will remain to be seen. But it sends a message that some aspects of our federal government have distanced themselves from the will of the people. And I think it sends a message that this city government understands who it works for. And I think that's really important. I want to express my appreciation for those of you that have supported this, because I don't know if this is something that we got the idea from other communities or if it originated here, but it shows leadership. And I'm very appreciative for that. The last thing I'd like to say is I'd like to encourage our city council members to be very thoughtful about their use of social media, because this issue has been spinning a little bit, and I think it's okay to disagree with your colleagues. That's the point of government, is to bring disparate opinions together. But I think it needs to happen in this room where you guys can talk and listen to each other and hear each other. This isn't Washington, D.C., and we don't need more divisiveness. This is Whitefish, And I think we expect collaboration and professionalism from our officials. Thank you.
Thanks, Margie.
Council, my name is Randy Larson. I am on Baker Avenue. I watched as the entire room stood and gave the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and where it says "One Nation under God." I could be behind this proclamation if you truly were under God. For in Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you. That's the word of the Lord. Now, if this proclamation was said to protect the lives of the baby also, then I could get behind this proclamation. But I don't believe that it is. I'd like to have that clarified. Now, if this proclamation is what it seems to be reading as you see it, then it's nothing more than a wicked and arrogant statement that each of you need to repent for. Your encouragement of sacrificing the unborn babies of Whitefish, they need to be repented of. This is a sin. This is a wicked sin that you will answer for. Further, this is an attempt to entice like-minded abortion advocates to the city. Keep in mind, had your parents, Steve, had your parents, Frank, John, Ben, Rebecca, had your parents aborted you, you wouldn't be here making this proclamation in the first place. In my utmost care for your eternal souls, I please ask you to repent and retract this proclamation tonight.
Thank you, Randy. Who's next?
Well, I've got a change of subject. But yeah, excuse me, I've got anxiety for public speaking.
Take your time.
My thoughts are on the deed-restricted houses. I don't know if this is a great spot to say this or not, but there's a lot of good tools. Oh, sorry, my name is Mark Andreas, 504 East 6th Street. And I bought my home in 2016, so that kind of plays into this. I've lived in the Valley since 2013. I'm a roofing contractor. But yeah, there's a lot of tools to grow your wealth in this country. Savings accounts being the smallest, maybe you learn that as a child. And as you get older, there's better tools. And the wealthier can use the tools to more advantage and gain that. Stock market fund might gain you 8% annual. That's pretty good. But real estate has been by far the most highest rate of return for your investment in this local area in the last decade. My house particularly, it's gone up about 250 to 400% since the purchase price that I bought it, which is a little ridiculous. And you guys don't, for the most part, look like me. I'm a little bit younger and I ski a lot, and my friends can't afford to stay here, which kind of sucks. And the idea of putting a deed-restricted home for them to buy something more affordable, cheap, at $400,000 a year, which might be that price point, you still got to earn at least $100K a year to be able to pay that $30K mortgage each year. That's a lot more than a lot of people I know are making. If you were to hold your home for the same time period that I did in a deed-restricted home and try to sell right now, you'd be lucky to make 20% ROI. That's a huge difference, and I feel like you're through, even though it has the best of intentions, and I definitely applaud that, it seems like in the long run, it's keeping the non-affluent and allowing the rest of this community to reap the benefit of the outside wealth that's really come in strong in the last couple of years. And maybe to a side note to that, I don't know, am I using up too much time? My grandfather just died a few years ago. He was 105. He grew up in a wall tent in Bisbee, Arizona, in mining camp. His stories were like a Doc Watson song. Mining camp situation is not too far off, and I don't really want to point a hard finger at this whatsoever, but when we get employee housing, that home, for the most part, was recently some lift mechanics that I know that got kicked out of their home because it was bought by a new employer instead of the old homeowner. And that rent doubled, and now there's the employees of that establishment that live there. But if that employee then, after moving here, finds a better job, they first have to find housing, which is very difficult in this town. So it almost entails you to that, West Virginia mining camp-esque situation. Maybe if I had any thoughts in a proposal, it would be to, similarly to the deed-restricted housing, require people to live 10 months a year in their home, but perhaps designate a neighborhood, like Columbia Summers to the high school. No rentals there. You must live there as your primary residence. And for the people that might use them as rental income to sustain a better lifestyle for themselves, that's wonderful, but if there's maybe a flood of inventory on the market, then it could be more affordable homes for our friends that are in the service industry. That's my 2 cents.
Thanks for your comments.
Good evening. My name's Ted Valentiner. I live south of Olney. In light of the recent proclamation you have made in the name of the citizens of Whitefish, I believe the following statements are necessary. First of all, I believe a civics history refresher might be appropriate. Our founding fathers established a Bill of Rights in our Constitution. In it, they explicitly established within the very First Amendment the right to free speech for all citizens. Your actions tonight have deprived me of that right. You have taken my right to express my opinion, hijacked it and replaced it with your opinion, and publicly made a statement of moral values on my behalf for which I was not consulted. I did not approve and with which I adamantly disagree. In your statement, you proclaim the right to personal autonomy. I find this incredibly hypocritical. The irony is that this body in recent past used every available option, both legal and illegal, to try and deny me personal autonomy. It appears that this is a very ideologically driven issue that you feel entitled to decide when bodily autonomy is or is not justified. There is no place within the city charter that entitles you to make the city council your ideological soapbox. Your responsibilities are to address and manage those issues such as utilities, zoning, and other essential services required for the city to function to the benefit of all the citizens. Your responsibility is to address these issues and no other. As the currently popular phrase states, stay in your lane. To all the citizens of Whitefish, I believe the following should be considered, and I paraphrase. A wise man once said, if you do not get involved in the political process, either as a candidate, supporting a candidate, by voting or encouraging others to vote, you will be ultimately governed by your inferiors. Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. Who's next? Cole.
Afternoon. Just one question. Did I hear correctly about the variance? Can we speak now, or do we wait until the?
If you don't mind, if we wait till we call that agenda item, Cole, I'd appreciate it. Thanks. Further public comment tonight?
Hello. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay. So for safety purposes, personal safety, legitimate personal safety purposes, I'm Z, and the address that I use, I call it Patriot Corner, which is the corner of Baker Ave and 2nd Street. For your record, thank you. So I am here to say thank you, thank you, thank you, City of Whitefish. Yes, the proclamation is symbolic, but symbols are important. Symbolic gestures are important in our time. For the nearly 2.5 years that I have stood on the corner to exercise my patriotic duty, calling out the wrongs as I see them in this country. I have been the recipient of car trash thrown at me, threats to my safety, such as we know where you live, we're going to take you out to the woods where no one will find you, etc., etc. But I do what I do because it's for the voiceless, and I feel like it's an important duty. I love this country and the potential that this country has to be a great country, and that's why I stand there at my own peril, truly. And I want to thank you because I don't really know if any other cities in Montana, maybe Missoula, I hope, but it's a big deal to those of us who are involved in these issues, whether it's women's reproductive health or any other great issue of the times. I just want to close by saying I feel so fortunate to live in this community. When I'm standing out on that corner, having been abused or waiting for it to come, as it inevitably does and will, and I have tourists that stop and ask why this corner, what this is, and I tell them this is City Hall, so it's, you know, the seat of our local government. And then they ask me, what is Whitefish? What's it like that you feel comfortable standing out here and doing what you're doing? And I've said, variation on the language, I'm going to clean it up a little bit, but when I describe Whitefish, I say that I feel, just from living here and talking to the majority of the citizens, that Whitefish I say Whitefish is the blue island of sanity in the crazy Red Sea of Ultramagistan, that is the greater county. And I say that because of the makeup of the county commission and decisions that they've made that have affected us as a community, whether it has to do with COVID or our library board appointees, etc. So I kiss the ground, figuratively, that I live here in this community, and that's it. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate you taking this action, and thank you.
Thank you, Z. Further public comment tonight? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Judy Pettinato, 440 Parkway Drive. I'd like to talk about the dock variance now because it's a long meeting for me. And I know I've written 2 letters, and so you guys probably know where I'm coming from. There was a couple of things that I did want to say, though, and one of them is that I do believe in following the rules. And about 2 years ago, my neighbor, Brett Rathel, he had 2 big pieces of dock added to his dock, and then he wanted a variance to put some rocks around his house. And I came to the council and said, his dock is not in compliance. And so they told him he couldn't have the variance until he put the dock into compliance. And so those 2 pieces of dock were taken away. And I was very happy. And now Birch Hill wants to push their dock out 20 feet. Well, the neighbors on the east, the Abels, and then on the west is Marcia Sheffels and Sean Aronow, and then there's me. And we are all against the dock being pushed out. Now, as I said in my letter, in 2007 and 2014, Sean Averill came and he wanted to push all of his entire dock system out 19.6 feet. And the council in both of those cases turned him down. And he is waiting, believe me. And if you let somebody push their docks out, there is probably going to be a lawsuit, in my opinion. And I hate to see that happen in Monks Bay. We don't have a lot of available water to use as it is. So if he moves his dock system out, then you've got Mountain Harbor and you've got other people that are going to want to move their docks out. And so in my opinion, it is a mistake to allow this to happen. But thank you for the service, and thank you for listening.
Thanks, Judy. Thanks for coming this evening. Further public comment tonight?
My name is Linda Shannon, and I live in Whitefish, Greater Whitefish. And I would also like to reiterate the hypocrisy of your proclamation. And I'd like to know where your personal concern for our autonomy was during COVID, when you forced mask mandates on people that didn't agree with them, knew that they were useless, and we were in charge of our own health, and you terrorized businesses in Whitefish, businesses that didn't want to enforce that. You had your little Gestapo going around. Where was your personal autonomy then? Where was your great concern for it? That's what I'd like to know.
Thanks, Linda. Who's next?
Kind of puny.
No, you're okay.
I'm Pam Reeb, beer spelled backwards, Reeb, at 1800 East Edgewood Drive. I hope I'm at the right meeting. You're going to talk about the 1291.
That's advertised as a public hearing, so if you don't mind.
Am I at the wrong place?
No, you're right.
We're coming up soon to that agenda item, so when we do
Oh.
call that agenda item, you're more than welcome to come back up and
Oh,
comment.
okay.
Just so you're part of the public record.
Well, heck.
We'll try to get there quickly. Thanks, Pam. Further comment this evening from the public? Richard?
Mayor and Council, Richard Hildner, 104 5th Street, Whitefish. Thank you for the proclamation this evening. I really appreciate that. When white supremacists came to our town several years ago, spewing hate and vitriol, our community stood tall in the face of such bigotry. From this experience, the city wrote and unanimously passed a non-discrimination ordinance protecting all of our citizens, regardless of their religion, sexual orientation, age, or ethnicity. Thank you for having the courage to, once again, proclaim and affirm our rights to personal autonomy and privacy, and I thank you for that effort.
Thank you, Richard. Further public comment tonight? I'm going to go ahead. Michelle, anyone online?
Just because there's a phone number there, for those of you who are online, if you'd like to address the council for anything that is not on the agenda advertised as a public hearing, please state your name or raise your hand and then state your name and address when I call upon you. I think we're good, John. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment period and turn it back.
Michelle? I'm on phone, so I couldn't raise my hand.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
This is Mary Flowers, Citizens for a Better Flathead, 135 Main Street in Kalispell. And I did want to note that I did try to join by WebEx, but the link on the agenda is not working, so I'm joining by phone. And I will be on for later in the evening, I hope, still as well. So if you'll recognize phone, that would be great. Unfortunately, because I wasn't able to get on, I didn't hear the prior discussion of the passage of the proclamation, but I did read it in the packet and want to appreciate the fact that you have stepped forward with this proclamation. And in particular, I want to speak to the local control aspect of the proclamation, because I think that what we've seen from the legislature, Montana legislature, recently, where they have removed the ability of local cities and towns to effectively plan for issues like housing, is an issue that should be protected local governments need to be able to really look at the particular local situations, that things like the transportation plan that's on your agenda later tonight, or your housing efforts to try to create affordable housing or community housing. Those are issues that are particular to each community and need to have local control. And so I particularly want to support that aspect of this proclamation and encourage you to, as you go consider legislation, and I know that Kalispell tonight is reviewing under public comment their legislative agenda. I hope that that will be on a future agenda for the city as well of Whitefish, and that you can address a priority being to encourage our legislature to respect the need in planning and zoning to have local control in particular. So again, I appreciate all aspects of your proclamation, but wanted to particularly point out that issue as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. With that statement, I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment period. We do have 2 communications from volunteer boards tonight. We'll start with item A, the Whitefish Community Library Excellent Library Service Award resolution. Is someone here? Hi.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Whoever said she was the shortest, she was wrong. Mr. Mayor, councilors, and city staff, including a new face over there. My name is Sarah Erickson, and I'm the chair of the Whitefish Community Library Board. I'm here tonight to boast about our library director, Joey Kozitsky, and the entire staff, Mary Drew Powers, Joy Hawley, Gail Melvin, Connie Mearsma, and Rusty Wire. Small staff, big library. For the 10th year in a row, the Whitefish Community Library has been awarded the Excellent Library Service Award. The ELSA, as it's known, is presented by the Montana State Library to libraries that provide excellent service to their communities. Whitefish Library has received this award every year since its inception. To qualify for this award, one must meet a set of standards that involves the director, the staff, and the board of trustees. The categories include human resources, access to the library, both hours and access for people with disabilities, policies and bylaws, planning and evaluation, finances, collection development, evaluation and access to the collection, facilities, public relations, and services. Meeting the standards, which were most recently updated and adopted by the State Library Commission in August 2021, ensures that our library qualifies for state aid. This amounted to almost $3,000 last year, and this aid supports our budget. And because of the recent census, we anticipate that the amount will increase slightly this year. In light of recent issues facing many libraries, we are fortunate that we have a staff that respects and cares for each other. Our Board of Trustees takes an active role in listening to the staff and supporting the mission of the Whitefish Community Library. And we are fortunate to have city administrators that continue to assist and champion us and our mission. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Sarah, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Nice job as usual. We have a second volunteer board report. I think John Phelps is here on behalf of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee and Park Board's recommendation to accept the concept plan for Riverbend Trail. John.
Thank you. 615 Monaghan Road. I'd like to take you back just about 9 months ago. On November 1 of last year, the council recommitted to building the Riverbend Trail and directed our committee and Public Works to begin working on it, and we have been doing that. We've spent about 9 months talking about the right concept plan to move forward with, and the concept plan is a general plan. It doesn't involve engineering. It doesn't have all the details that a design plan would contain, but it's a start. And Bruce Booty was kind enough, at no cost to the city, to prepare a detailed concept plan. And our committee has discussed that at length, and Bruce has spent quite a bit of time explaining it. At the same time, and for the first time, the condo owners proposed a plan. We'd been looking for one for a long time, and they finally proposed one. And their plan is a surface plan. It's a surface trail, as opposed to the one Bruce Booty has come up with, which is an elevated trail. Their trail would be built entirely on the surface of the riverbank, and so completely different. We looked at both. In order to fairly compare them, we came up with a list of pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages as to both proposed trails, and the clear winner was Bruce's proposal. And I'd like to give you some reasons. I won't go through all of them. We had 32 pros and cons on the different trails, and I won't go nearly through that many. But the most significant criticism of their plan is that a similar surface trail following a similar route was proposed by the city to Fish, Wildlife, and Parks in 2019, and they were very negative in their reception. And at the time, some city representatives were also negative in terms of building a surface trail on that riverbank. A few other differences. I'll give you some of the advantages of the Riverbend Trail elevated. It relies primarily on the helical piers supporting the path of a type previously approved by Fish, Wildlife, and Parks in Great Falls. The elevated path allows construction of the entire length of the trail with minimal excavation, fill, or other construction on the riverbank. An elevated path would place the entire length of the trail above the ordinary high water mark. An elevated trail allows an additional 4 feet in width to be cantilevered out over the state-owned riverbed, allowing a 10-foot path along most of the length of the Riverbend property. You'll require, I'm sure you remind, we have only a 6-foot wide easement from the property owners, so by hanging it out over the river, we can gain another 4 feet. The American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, called AASHTO, their design guidelines recommend a minimum of 10 feet for multi-use trails, and that would allow use by individuals of all ages and abilities. For its entire length, the elevated path would maintain a grade that complies with the Americans with Disabilities Act, consistent with all other sections of the city's river trail. Now, disadvantages. The primary disadvantage of the city's, or the proposed elevated trail, is that it's certainly going to be more expensive to build than it would cost to build one on the surface. That is the main difference there. Now, there's advantages to the route proposed by the condo owners. It could be built in a shorter time frame because it's simpler. It would place it at a proximity and closeness that the condo owners want and that are pleased with. It would preserve much of the residents' current access to the river. The downsides of the surface trail that the owners proposed is that it has been treated negatively by Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, which makes it very unlikely that we're going to get very far proposing the same thing again. A surface trail would require excavation, filling, and a section of stacked rock retaining wall. A surface trail limited to a 6-foot wide width would not be ADA compliant along its entire length. And the route that they propose is significantly below the elevation needed to make an ADA compliant connection to Casey Malmquist property to the north. So based on all that, our committee voted about 6 weeks ago to approve Bruce Booty's elevated concept plan, and that was followed by the Park Board in August approving it as well with a unanimous vote, and they recommended that it move on to you. And so at this point, I'd like to have Bruce come up and explain some of the details of his plan.
Thanks, John.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. And Michelle, can we see the trails on the screen? The 20 scale first and then the 40. That's it. Thank you. So as John was describing, what we're proposing is an elevated concrete surfaced pathway constructed on helical piers. And if you see, there are 3 blue lines on the drawing. The trail is on top of the lowest one, and that's indicating that that blue line is the low water mark of the Whitefish River. So that's what the trail is centered on, so that we can take advantage of the 6-foot on the Riverbend condo property and cantilevering 4 feet out on the state-owned riverbed. And we believe that's the only way we can get a 10-foot width, which is what we need for the ability of all people to use this trail. The next blue line up just above that is the average high water mark. And the trail will be built about 7/10 of a foot vertically above the average high water mark. And then the last blue line is the darker one up right next to the condo buildings, and that is the 100-year floodplain. So our trail, our proposed trail, will be underwater at the 100-year flood. And what we are doing is trying to find a compromise where we can keep the trail as far as possible away from the condo owners' buildings and at an elevation where it's almost always accessible. So for instance, this spring when we had the highest, some of the highest water ever recorded in Whitefish, that elevation is still 2 feet below the flood elevation. So in the case of this year, this trail would have been underwater by about a foot, and it would have lasted for a couple weeks. And that happens very rarely. And again, it's a compromise to keep it away from the condo buildings, and also not to have it so far up in the air that it diminishes the condo owner's view of the river. So, trying to find a balance. Also, we have other constraints that we have to work with. We have to meet the grade of the underpass, which has already been built and is existing. And then we have to meet the right grade at the north property line adjacent to the Malmquist property. And what we've proposed now is starting about 2/3 of the way up the trail. There's an elevation on there, 3001, it says 01. It's just north of the middle dock. And from there, we start climbing at 5%. And that takes us all the way up to the BNSF trail. That's how much length we need to get there. So we're gaining some of that on the Riverbend property. And also we had some comment from the condo owners that our railings and the trail will block their view of the river. So in this, we've suggested a cable rail, which is a lot less visible and will give them better view to the river. So if we could go to the 40 scale, there are a couple other issues that we're working around. So again, this is now looking at the entire trail segment from K. Beller Park under Highway 93 across the Riverbend condo property and onto the Malmquist property and up to the BNSF Loop Trail on the north. And again, we're trying to gain that elevation across the two properties. So the other obstacle in the way is if you see at the north portion of the Malmquist property, close to the river, there's some dashed lines there, and that is the infiltrator system for the contaminated groundwater that's coming from the old lagoons in BNSF. And that water goes into a pipe system in that easement, and then it gravity feeds a pump house over on BNSF land, and that's pumped up to the lagoons on BNSF property. So we need to avoid that with our trail too. We're not going to encumber the trail with that system. So those are the primary constraints, and we feel that this is really the best option to serve the entire populace of the community and visitors. So I'd be glad to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce, and thanks for donating your time for this important project. It's much appreciated. Any questions for Bruce? Rebecca?
One quick. We have believed for 25 years or more that the city had to reach agreement with the condo owners before we could move forward. The easement deed says as much, but it says then if they do reach agreement and if the trail is built, that location where it's built fixes the easement forever. So again, we never imagined that the trail had actually been built. About 6 months ago, I got a call from a local Whitefish person who was on the 1983 City Park Board. And she told me that the developer came to the park board, he wanted to build the trail, he avoided some cash in lieu that he would otherwise have to pay, and they agreed to it. And they agreed on location, and he built it. And when we heard that, we started asking around, and we found a gentleman who built the trail for the developer. We found people that lived in the condo building and lived there with the trail and knew of the trail. So we were certain that it happened, but we needed a picture. We felt like to convince the condo owners and to convince everyone, we needed a picture showing the trail. And that was very hard to find until a couple weeks ago. And we found a local realtor who went back through all the MLS listings back in that era, 1983, 1990, and he presented us with a picture that shows the trail. And so, Michelle, if you could put that up there. Wasn't trying to delay.
Maybe she can look for that photo and show it to us later, just in the spirit of our agenda here, John.
And I think it'll warm your heart.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
With that said, I would entertain a motion to accept the concept plan for Riverbend Trail.
Mr. Mayor, I will move to approve Riverbend Trail.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded
I'll
by
second.
Councilor Cornell. Rebecca?
I guess I don't have to ask Bruce, but we always have suspension bridges in Whitefish, so is a helical thing, they are implanted into the ground, into the riverbed?
Yeah, they're helical piles that are just driven vertically, and what's nice about it is the equipment essentially tracks on the helical pier in the first section of bridge built, drills the next set of piers, lays the deck, so it's very minimal disturbance to existing ground. And we have actually quite a few examples of this technology throughout town.
We do.
Yep.
So it's stable, more,
Yes.
okay. All right. Thanks.
Further questions? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion passes unanimously. And an hour and 20 minutes later, we are at our consent agenda. You have the minutes from the August 15th, 2022 regular session. Can I have a motion for approval? Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second with 2 corrections.
Seconded by Councilor Norton. Rebecca?
Michelle, it's page 59, I think. I scribbled it on something, and it's under Josh Wilson, last sentence, it's written as respect, and I think it means request. So replace respect with request. And page 59, the last sentence should have a small t, not a large t. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as amended, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously, which brings us on to our first public hearing of the night. Bear with me. These are rather lengthy ordinances. We'll start with ordinance 8A, ordinance number 22-12, an ordinance rezoning approximately 66.4 acres of land located to the east of East 2nd Street and southeast Edgewood Drive, known as Track 3D, 5BA, and 3E in sections 32 and 33, Township 31 North, Range 21 West in Flathead County, Montana, from SAG 10, which is Suburban Agricultural, and County Ag 20 Agricultural, to WCR Country Residential District and WA, which is our Agricultural District, and adopting findings with respect to such rezone. And this will be on a first reading. Wendy, I had one quick question for you. Would you like to consolidate these 2 items into one presentation and public hearing, or keep them separate?
I was thinking, Michelle, we'll start with slide 6. Because this is an annexation, oh, perfect, rezone, I thought we should do this one first and just talk about the fact that it's being annexed. And then the second one is more the full development.
Okay.
And then let's hold one public hearing for all 3 actions.
The map
for that one.
amendment, the
growth policy
preliminary
amendment.
plat. Okay.
Right.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, so this request before you is simply to rezone recently annexed property. This is not the development portion. Slide 6 disappeared. There we go. Okay, so this property was annexed into the city in June 20th. And because it is no longer in the county, we need to give it Whitefish zoning designations. And again, as the mayor mentioned, the property, if you could go on to slide 7, please, has 1 parcel, the zone SAG 10, and then 2 parcels that are zoned Ag 20. And their request is to go to WCR for the western portion and WA for the eastern portion. We can't implement county zoning, so that's the reason that we need to have the properties zoned to Whitefish designations. The properties are a total of about 66 acres. They're undeveloped, and they have a growth policy designation as rural. According to the growth policy, the zoning would be mainly WA 10 and WA 20, which we don't have right now. So can you go to slide, 7. Okay. So the property is surrounded by residential uses, county lands to the north and to the east, and then the train tracks to the south. So sewer and water are nearby, and it's served by other public services and facilities. We did notice adjacent landowners. We did kind of one gigantic public notice for all the different requests. We did receive public comment, but most of them were related to the specific development proposal, which we'll talk about at the next public hearing. So we do review zone changes according to the criteria in the zoning regulations. The city has had a policy of not downzoning properties once they are annexed, and we try and mirror the closest zoning that we have to what the county has. So the WCR is the closest we have to the SAG 10, and then the WA is the closest we have to the Ag 20. As far as securing safety from public, fire, panic, and other dangers, as soon as the project is developed, it'll have to meet all the city standards, the building code, the zoning code, and the engineering standards. This property is located in the city's extension of services plan and is planned to have some sort of services at some point at the time of development. Again, sewer and water are available. They're on the south side of the train tracks, and we'll talk about that when with the next public hearing. The zoning does include setbacks, maximum building height, and lot coverage, and the effects of motorized and non-motorized will be happening at the time of development. The area is identified as rural, and these are our closest, most compatible designations for this area. The planning board did hold a public hearing on July 21st. 5 members spoke at the public hearing, but again, they were more concerned with the development aspect than not the zone change. And so, again, those comments we'll hear at the time of that public hearing. So the planning board did unanimously recommend this annexation rezone. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions for Wendy on her staff report? Not seeing any. Thanks, Wendy. We did advertise for a public hearing on ordinance 22-12, and we'll hold that public hearing now. Is there any public comment, or does the applicant have anything additional to share? Not seeing any comment. Michelle, online?
For those who are attending via phone, please use *3 on your phone pad, and that will raise your hand if you'd like to speak towards this agenda item. For those of you who are attending via WebEx, your hand icon is at the bottom of the screen. Looks like we're good, John.
Great. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve. Are we doing item B right now, or are we doing item
We're on item 8A.
Okay, I move to approve the ordinance rezoning approximately 66.4 acres of land located to the east of East 2nd Street and south of East Edgewood Drive, known as Tract 3D 5 Bravo Alpha and 3 Echo, course number 2134 in section 32 and 33, and accept the finding of facts of the city staff as well as the recommendation by the city planning.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Norton. Giuseppe, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I watched August 15th meeting online from where I was, and I noticed that some of the applicants wanted to postpone some of these requests because we need a supermajority, and you guys were for, so they probably thought to minimize the risk by having a fuller council. And again, there are no new facts emerged since the planning board meeting and no changes to the project. For that reason, I move to approve it.
Thank you, Giuseppe. As mentioned, this does require a supermajority of the council, so 4 out of the 5 council members present need to vote in the affirmative for this to pass. There is a motion on the table for approval. Further comments? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. We'll move on to item 8B, which is consideration of a request from 1291 Edgewood LLC for a growth policy map amendment, zoning map amendment, preliminary plat, and PUD overlay, referenced as the Edgewood 90 project located at 1291 East Edgewood Drive and unaddressed parcels to the east of East 2nd Street, legally described as tracts 3, 3D, 3E, and 3 and 5BA in section 32 and section 33, Township 31 North, Range 21 West in Flathead County, Montana. And this again was postponed from our August 15th meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I move. Oh, we read the packet. Can we just move to approve it?
Wendy has to present a
Right.
staff
I
report,
wanted
and
to
then we
save
need
you
to take public comment as well. Wendy.
Definitely have to hold the public hearing. So again, there's a growth policy amendment, a zone change, a preliminary plat, and a PUD, and we can discuss it all together. They're also interrelated, but you will need to make 3 separate motions, and that is exactly how the planning board did it. So, yeah. So next slide, please. So the first item we're going to talk about is the growth policy, and as you know, the growth policy is the big overlying land use map. And in order for subsequent amendments, this is the first step that needs to happen. So the applicant is requesting to amend the growth policy to change 3.42 acres from planned industrial to urban. And this is located at 1291 East Edgewood. It's in the former tree farm. There's kind of a storage facility that's kind of to the west. It's near there, right off of Edgewood. The property is undeveloped and is zoned WI. Again, the current land use designation is planned industrial, and in order to facilitate a residential development, they are requesting an amendment to urban. We did notice adjacent landowners and place a sign on the property and place a legal in the paper. We received a number of public comments citing concerns with the impact on city services, infrastructure, the lack of pedestrian and bicycle facilities, high groundwater, the loss of agricultural lands, a change in the neighborhood character, impact on residential use on the existing airport, the loss of industrial lands. We did receive several comments. Again, this is kind of for the full project, not specifically this growth policy amendment, with concerns with some improvements that we'll talk about in a minute about streetlights on East 2nd Street. The growth policy gives us a couple of review criteria when considering applications for amendments. Was there an error? Have community conditions changed? And is there some clear and extraordinary benefit? There is no error. This has been designated this way for a while. Under community conditions changing, things have changed with respect to affordability and housing and rentals since the 2007 growth policy amendment. In 2007, we did talk about affordable housing, but the extreme upward rise in pricing, lack of affordable rentals for our local workforce, and the extremely low vacancy rate have really exacerbated this, especially by the pandemic and the new influx of folks. We do have goals and policies talking about a variety and supply of different types of housing product types and densities. The amendment requests 3.42 acres of a 26.5-acre parcel for 30 rentals, with 6 being deed restricted. This would remove almost 3.5 acres of industrial land, and we don't, which could possibly impact the economic diversification of our community, but it is a small change. So we believe that the community conditions have changed enough to warrant this minor amendment. And in addition, that industrial land has remained undeveloped for years. There's been no, interest in developing it, mostly due to the lack of water and sewer, I believe. They are providing some clear and extraordinary community benefits by providing some affordable housing in addition to some deed-restricted affordable housing. So staff did recommend approval of this text amendment, and the planning board also agreed. Next slide, please. So then the next step, if the growth policy amendment is approved, is to do a zone change on that particular piece of property. Again, the property itself is zoned WI. They are requesting a proposal to amend it to WR2, again, to facilitate urban development. It is surrounded by industrial on the south, east, and west, and then County Seg 10 towards the north. Again, the comments that we received are also pertinent to this particular packet. The urban land use designation, WR2, is the highest density that you can get with that land use designation. Again, this property is within our extension of services plan. Any future development needs to meet all the zoning and setbacks and height and engineering standards and fire department requirements and building code. We'll look at adequate transportation, water sewerage at the time of development, which is the next application request, as well as non-motorized and motorized transportation systems. So planning board also recommended approval of this zone change, and staff agreed with that. Okay, so the next slide, please. So this next request is a preliminary plat with a PUD overlay, which is over a portion of it, which we'll show you a map here in a second. So the applicant is proposing a 15-lot subdivision that would be served by public services and facilities, water and sewer. It's on 92.91 acres. It's north of the train tracks, south of East Edgewood, and is bisected by East 2nd Street. So East 2nd Street is the one that goes by the dog park and goes across the train tracks. On the west side, which is the slide that's shown here, the applicant is proposing 5 industrial lots and 1 lot that we're proposing to have zone WR2 for 30 multifamily units. in 3 buildings. 6 of the 30 units are proposed to be deed restricted for affordability. The lots on the west side will have access off a newly constructed public right-of-way that would be built to city standards. This road would loop through from East Edgewood and around to East Edgewood. There's an additional lot identified future phase, which also has access off of either East Edgewood or East 2nd Street. Within the development itself, they're providing 4.6 acres of open space and a proposed 10-foot wide shared use path that would connect the new public street over to East 2nd Street. The applicant has also identified a developed park area that would be privately owned and maintained but open to the public. And then north of the proposed apartments, there's a 100-foot tree buffer along East Edgewood Drive. And that also is providing open space and a buffer to the neighbors to the north. Next slide, please. On the eastern side, the applicant is proposing, which has been slightly amended by planning board, we'll talk about that in a second, a 9-lot rural residential subdivision off a newly constructed public or private right-of-way that would terminate in a cul-de-sac. This private road is designed to be a rural road section. As part of this request, the applicants requested a subdivision variance to the road standards. They are requesting a sidewalk only on one side, and then no streetlights and no street trees. There's also open space on this side where it kind of wraps around the south and the western portion of the project. Next slide, please. As part of the preliminary plat, they're requesting a PUD overlay on a portion of the subdivision. This is a little unique. Usually we just see a PUD overlay on everything, but they only need the PUD for the multifamily and then to make the lots a little bit smaller on the eastern side. So it's in order to construct the 30-unit multifamily and then to spread out those lots on the eastern side instead of having them all kind of clustered along East 2nd Street. The lots on the eastern side range in size from 3.5 to about 10.5 acres. This is a residential RPUD. The one zoning deviation they are requesting is on the eastern side in order to kind of create that sort of blended lot sizes, having smaller lots a little bit on the west, and then the lots get bigger as you go east towards the more rural areas to the east. Community benefits that the applicant is providing, public access to a shared use path. They're also including access to an open space area and protecting environmentally sensitive areas. They're providing a public facility as part of bringing sewer to the other side of the train tracks and extending it for their development. They're also going to be obligated to put in a lift station. And then once that's been improved, it'll be dedicated to the city. There's also developed parkland that's open to the public. And then they are also providing 6 affordable housing units, which is not required, and they don't need it for a density bonus. It's 20% of the multifamily units and 15% of the entire site. As part of that, they are, as part of providing affordable housing, you get some incentives or you can request them, and so they are requesting the extra 5 feet for the multifamily. Again, the property is located at 1291 Edgewood, East Edgewood, and 3 unaddressed parcels to the east. The property is undeveloped and was a former tree farm on the west side and then agriculture on the east side. Under the review and findings for subdivision, under wildland urban interface, the fire marshal recommends the open space areas be properly mitigated for wildland fire protection and maintained yearly. The properties outside any FEMA areas. As far as access, they have the loop public street on the western side and then the private cul-de-sac on the eastern side. They did do a traffic impact study, and they found it would generate 500 new daily trips, 60% of which will go south on East 2nd Street, 35% will go west on East Edgewood Drive, and 5% would go east. According to the TIS, development will have minimal impacts on traffic operations, and no roadway improvements were recommended. There's no map crucial wildlife habitat or daily or seasonal migration corridors. However, it's very likely that there's wildlife out there. The preservation of the tree buffers and other open space areas will help maintain those patterns. We did not receive any comments from Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. The property is located in an area for potential of high groundwater, so they will be obligated as part of their engineering review to do some groundwater monitoring. If the adjusted high groundwater is determined to be within 6 feet of the surface, we'll have them place a statement on the face of the plat saying that crawl spaces are not, and basements are not recommended. There are a couple of wetlands identified on the western portion of the property, which is where that open space A is located. It bisects the property running in a north to south fashion, and it's almost 4 acres. And there's another acre of wetland kind of in the south corner. Other areas that were identified as wetlands by the consultants, we've identified them as stormwater conveyances. They're the ditches along the roads. So those will require just to be left in an open, don't block those areas at all. The buffer requirement for wetlands, of course, is 100 feet plus a 10-foot setback. We will ask for a plan to ensure that there's adequate area for construction outside the wetland and associated buffers. It appears that's being met. We'll have a mitigation plan for the path, which we'd like to ensure is a shared use path that's paved with lighting to be approved by both Parks and the Public Works Department. They can have stormwater facilities in the buffers, provided they're in the outer 25%, and trails can also go in buffers. There's also a stormwater conveyance on the eastern portion of the property that also may be considered a wetland, but we consider it a stormwater conveyance, that we will make sure that they do not interfere with that stormwater flow. You have a preliminary drainage plan that was in the packet that's been reviewed by the City Public Works Department. And again, water and sewer are on the south side of the train tracks, and so they'll be extending water and sewer under the train tracks. They'll need to work with BNSF for that. And we'll be installing a lift station for sewer. The streets will be privately constructed and owned and maintained, but open to the public. The street on the western portion will be a typical 60-foot right-of-way. The street on the eastern portion will be private road designed with a rural section with the variance that they've requested. With the increased usage of East 2nd Street, the city recommends that section be upgraded to match the improvements on East 2nd Street on the south side, which is a curb and gutter, street trees, and street lights. And then staff will recommend a condition, or we've recommended a condition of approval that a fee in lieu of sidewalks be paid for the east side of East 2nd Street, but not on the west side because of the shared use path that they're putting in. They are setting aside 20% of the project in open space for a total of 13.9 acres. A portion of this is wetland and buffer. They get to do 20% because they're providing affordable housing. The area along the north side of the multifamily, the 100-foot tree buffer that's screening the apartments is heavily treed with an overgrown former tree farm. We'd like to see this area be mitigated and thinned a little bit just for the health of the stand so it doesn't all die out at one point. They are proposing some usable open space that would be open to the public. We know that there's some standards that the Parks Department deals with when it's a public park versus a private park, so we'd like to have them consult with the Parks Department on their improvements. So they are exempt from parkland dedication because they are dedicating more open space than would be required for a standard subdivision. We'd also like to see the buffer to the north of the multifamily be a little usable for the folks that live there and have them maybe install a trail so folks could take a short walk and it could connect into the other trail system that they're proposing. Again, because the area is so overgrown, staff has made a recommendation, some careful thinning of the trees to both maintain the buffer and ensure its long-term survivability. One thing you'll note too on this map is the open space A does not have the PUD overlay. Because this project, that's part of the community benefit and is part of the subdivision and all the bells and whistles that come along with that, we have requested that that PUD overlay include that open space A. So if this comes back to you for a second reading, that legal description will be upgraded to include that area. Just a couple of items in the PUD overlay itself and the standards that are in there. They are preserving and maintaining the character and qualities of the existing neighborhood. The area is very rural in densities, and they're attempting to place the larger lots to the east closer to the more rural lots, and then providing a treed buffer for the multifamily surrounding neighborhood. There is limited opportunity to do street continuity through and extending the city's street grid system. Under developing high-quality streetscapes, East Edgewood is a county road with a rural section that includes ditches on both sides, and there's no proposed changes to East Edgewood. East 2nd Street will be upgraded to complement the East 2nd Street and the increased ped bike usage that's likely going to happen with that installation of that trail and multifamily and kids trying to get to school. And then within the development, the public streets will meet all city standards. They are also providing a pedestrian connection, an easement on the north side of East Edgewood along that property on the west side in compliance with the 2017 Connect Whitefish plan that identified East Edgewood looping back down to East 2nd and kind of a loop through town. You go to the next slide. Zoom in on the multifamily there. So again, the community benefits that they're providing are public access to a shared use path that accesses open space areas and passing through an environmentally sensitive area. They're providing public facilities, including a trail and a lift station. And then they are providing some affordable housing that's not needed for a density bonus. Here's kind of the layout they're showing with the 3 buildings, and they've got some other graphics that they're going to show you, and 6 of which would be deed restricted for affordability. As part of making your motion, you also have to approve the variance request, and we find that we support the variance request, and so did Planning Board. So the Planning Board held a public hearing, again, the big joint public hearing. They approved the subdivision variance and the zoning deviation as part of their motion and recommended approval of the subdivision. They approved all conditions and added an additional one. So they added a condition number 24 that on the east side, which shows 9 lots, that they would go down to 8 lots, and that there would be 2 lots on the eastern portion of the subdivision, and would also include a utility easement between lots 9 and 10. And we can go back to that map if you want to see that. Just to hit some of the highlights of the other conditions of approval. We want to ensure the 10-foot wide shared use path on the west side of the development is paved and includes the installation of path lighting to keep it safe for everybody. That design must be reviewed and approved by the Public Works and Parks Department. The property owner will be responsible for its long-term maintenance, including weed abatement, snow plowing, and surface maintenance. The design of the open space on the west side that's open to the public must be reviewed and approved by the Parks Department before any installation. Impacts to the wetland need to be fully mitigated, and they need to submit a plan for that. East Edgewood from BNSF train tracks to East Edgewood Drive must be improved to include curb, gutters, street trees, and streetlights on both sides, and coordinate with the Parks Department on the installation of streetlights. A fee in lieu of sidewalks must be paid for the east side of East 2nd Street from the BNSF train tracks to East Edgewood. We want to see some tree management in that 100-foot buffer to the north of the apartments. We want some notes on the face of the plat to identify that the agricultural uses surrounding predate this development, so we don't want to have complaints. That the internal roads that are private are open to the public, as we always require. That any identified stormwater conveyances cannot be filled or developed. And then if the adjusted high groundwater is less than 6 feet, that we'd want to discourage basements and crawl spaces. Compliance with the growth policy, they need to work with the housing authority. The multifamily obviously needs to go to ARC review and meet all of our multifamily standards. And I think that's it. It's a big, complicated project.
Thanks, Wendy. We are going to take a short break in just a minute, but we'll start and finish with any questions of Wendy from council before we go to our public hearing. We'll just break very briefly. Rebecca, and then Frank.
You want to go first, Frank? Okay.
So Wendy, on, how did you guys come up with the 100-foot tree buffer?
They proposed it.
Okay, so I'd like to add another condition to have a tree buffer on the south side of Lot 2, 3, and 4, but those are not in the PUD.
They're not in the PUD.
So we
And
can't-
landscaping buffers on a subdivision, that's a zoning issue, and that needs to be addressed at the time of zoning, like when a building permit comes in, or, you know, if they came in and asked for a CUP, that would be a time to look at something like that. It is not part of the PUD.
So, and the reason why I'm saying this, you guys, is because I've been studying this property ever since I sat in on the planning board, and it's beautiful. I mean, from the dog park, you look and it's trees, and so I'm wondering about the community's reaction to having it become car lots and no buffering. So I'm planting a seed here. That's all. Thank you.
Microphone.
I thought I had, is this on now?
It's on. Yeah.
Okay, switching it to which, I got to switch, and so it's a little harder for me today. Tell me a little bit about, articulate for us all, what densities could be allowed on, for example, lots 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6?
It's zoned industrial, so whatever industrial items are in.
So that stays industrial,
That stays
nothing changes
industrial.
on that?
You
Okay.
can't do any residential in industrial. You can have like a caretaker unit, but that's hardly.
And then on the, what I'll call the east of East Edgewood, those lots that are allocated over there, are they going to be allowed to be subdivided subsequently? Or are they just simply, are they going to be, are they going to have to be maintained in that size?
They would, because it's going to have the PUD overlay identifying this is the layout, this is the subdivision. Any amendments, we're going to have to come back through for a PUD amendment.
Okay.
Can I follow up on that?
Yes, please.
So if the council, if this gets an affirmative vote this evening, can the council add a condition that deed restricts the lots to the east of East Second Street, essentially deed restricting to prevent further subdivision?
The existing zoning would prohibit that because it's underlying zoning. You'd be further deviating from the minimum lot sizes of what's allowed in the zoning. So they would have to come back with a PUD amendment to have smaller lots.
But we can't deed restrict that to prevent a future
You could add a
PUD amendment?
condition in there, but it'd kind of be redundant because they couldn't do anything without coming back to you guys.
No, well, it would preclude them from coming back to do a PUD amendment.
Well, yeah, I mean, the zoning wouldn't allow it because of the zoning density of the WA and the WCR.
Okay. Frank, anything further? Steve, and then Giuseppe, and then Ben.
In one of these maps, I forget which one of these three packets, there was something that said that there were 2 phases. I forget which one it was. And the lot 6 was basically in phase 2. Lots 1 through 5 and 7 through 15 were in phase 1. And then lot 6 was phase 2. My question is, I forget what that new rule that was passed by the state was. If this is indeed a phased project, would they have to come back to begin phase 2?
Right. So, I mean, it's almost easier to describe like the eastern side. Say they did like the eastern third, they said that was phase 1, and they just built a little bit of road, and they extended water sewer just for those 3 lots on the eastern side.
Yes.
And then when they came in and they wanted to do another section of road and extend sewer, then yeah, you're right, they'd have to come back in. But if they do all the improvements, and maybe they don't subdivide all the lots immediately, kind of like Jerry Dunker's project on Trailview, he put in the road and the water and the sewer, but he's come in and he's just subdivided the lots. There's been no improvements. We haven't considered that a phased development.
Okay.
But you're right, if it has to come back for a public review for a phased subdivision, so maybe the applicant remembers. I can't quite find that map.
Okay, all right. I saw it somewhere. I'm sorry. I lost it somewhere.
Yeah, it's a big packet.
300 pages. The other question I had was about the planning board's amendment or additional condition of approval. So they wanted to take off one of the lots up there? Did they say which one?
Well, they're gonna merge those 3 lots and have them be 2 lots.
Which ones? 13, 14, and 15?
I can't read it. I think it's like 9, 10, and 11.
Oh, the ones on the back.
Yeah, the easterly ones, those easterly 3 are gonna become 2.
Okay, and then they
they'll
wanted
put
to
a
have
utility easement in between the 2 lots.
Okay, that just ends at the next property
Right.
to the east?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Giuseppe. Yep. And Ben.
A few questions, if you don't mind. The first is I'm wondering if you could touch quickly on pedestrian access. It looks like in the plan here, and I'm mostly concerned about the higher density area. The pedestrian access would be to the east down this shared path and then down south to the train tracks. And that would have to be built with the project or with the...
With the project, yeah.
Okay. Is there anything to pick that up again on Second Street?
Maybe Craig could talk about that. We talked about maybe a city project that would extend that path. On the south side of the train tracks, we talked about.
Yeah, so with the, I think I'm on. With the current proposal, it wouldn't connect directly to the shared use path, which stops at the dog park. There would be a required extension, probably another 200 or 300 feet or so to the south.
Is that part of the developer's scope, or is that something the city would do?
It's not shown in the scope. I think it could be a condition of approval, but it's not shown in this plan.
So without that, then there's no pedestrian connectivity to our sidewalks and stuff on Second Street?
It could get you across the tracks, but correct, that's where it would stop.
Okay. And a related thing is our future plan to extend the shared use path on Edgewood going east past Texas to connect to this down the road?
Correct, yeah, that's shown in the Connect Whitefish Bike and Pedestrian Plan as a future project.
Because I didn't see anything in the preliminary plat or anything that describes some sort of an easement or something. Do we need to do anything in this proposal to make sure that we can do that in the future?
Well, this
There is an easement.
path would connect directly to Edgewood, yes.
And there's an easement along East Edgewood from that northwest corner all the way to East Second Street. It's a 15-foot easement.
Okay.
Just the easement.
And then Craig, since you're here, do you have any general comments on the services and the lift station? And I was curious if the area to the north side of Edgewood ever were to develop down the road, would they be connecting into this too, or how does that just lay out for the future?
They would, yeah. We would want to make sure the final design of the lift station includes enough storage for future expansion to the north. The pumps wouldn't necessarily go in during this project to accommodate that, but we'd want to make sure the storage was accounted for.
These services would have to be installed underneath the railroad tracks?
Correct, yeah. Both water and sewer will have to extend beneath the railroad.
Is that concerning in any respect?
Well, I mean, it's going to require BNSF approval, which definitely raises some concern, but we do have other utilities that go under the tracks, and BN has been amenable to, extending services under their utilities.
Okay. Okay, my last question has to do with the housing proposed. Is this considered part of the voluntary legacy homes program and subject to all the regulations therein? Okay. The only thing that stood out to me was I saw in the developer's application, it said that the area median income was 75%, and I had recollected that that program specified 70%.
Right, yeah. Their application did, or their housing mitigation plan did say that, but we did condition it that it would be 70%. And that is the requirement in the zoning.
Okay, so there is a specific condition that says the 70%?
I believe so. Yeah, condition number 20. Compliance with the legacy home program will be met through the dedication of 6 deed restricted apartments with a range of rent from 60 to 80% AMI with an average of 70 at from a final plat.
So that supersedes what's written in the
Yep.
development application?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. We're going to go ahead and recess for about 5 minutes, and we'll reconvene here at about 9:03. Thanks very much. We're going to go ahead and get started. If folks could take their seats, please. I'm going to go ahead and call the public hearing for item 8B of our agenda, which will be specific to both the resolution as well as the two ordinances for this item. So we'll take one public hearing. We'll first hear from the applicant. Sean.
Thank you, guys. My name's Sean Averill, part of the development team on this, and I think we have a presentation that she's pulling up. So I'll try to, this is a very complicated project, as you guys were hearing, so I'll try to bring it back to how we got here, because I think it's a pretty cool project once you put all the pieces together. So as everyone can see from that Google slide right there, you know, this is a unique area that's on the transition from pretty dense city to some larger rural farms. And so when this property came up for sale, I have a place adjacent to it across Edgewood, and a couple neighbors and I were watching this and kind of going, well, what could someone do there? And after we dug into it a little bit, there's some pretty things that could happen in there that kind of had us concerned. So I'm just one of the partners. There's two other partners, and we bought this and try to develop it kind of to, you know, help the neighborhood a little bit along. So if you zoom in on the next slide there, I guess, Michelle. So, you know, obviously, as you guys saw, it's two unique pieces. There's a field and there's an industrial park. So I'll start with the field on the right. If you go to the next slide. So this was our plan before planning board, as they saw these range from 4 to about 10-acre tracts. And the theory was to try to literally cap off the city and be that transition from dense subdivision to larger farms. The neighbors, you know, I got together and we helped design this. So the big thing from the neighbors is they didn't want driveways off each second. So we brought the driveway down. I'm sorry, they did not want driveways off Edgewood. So we brought the driveway in off of East Second. Since this plan was submitted, the one neighbor to the east, Gary, and I kind of got together, and he wanted to see two 15-acre tracts on the side. Lot 11 was kind of problematic. Anyway, so we changed this plan. It should be the next slide, I hope, Michelle, to this is the new plan. So there's some questions there. So basically, we're going from about 5-acre tracts to two 15s on the end. Those highlighted areas around those homes represents about a 1 acre. So you can kind of see what it would look like if you had an acre around your house. And again, the theory here is kind of a rural cap off the town a little bit and be that transition point to the things. Now, surprisingly, at planning board, there's a couple members that wanted to see a lot more density in here. We heard we want this to be High Point on Second style, which, you know, you could fit it in there, but we didn't really want that as the neighbors. So we're pretty happy with this. You know, we sat down with basically every neighbor out there and helped design this field. So that's pretty much the easy side to understand. The next slide, Michelle, will show you this one. So this is the complicated side to understand. This is zoned industrial, and you know, what does that mean exactly? Well, we kind of learned a lot. There's a lot of uses in industrial just by right. There's, as it came up at planning board, there's asphalt manufacturing. There's a lot of things you could do in there. And so, and is on just to the west of this property, the barge kind of storage area popped up. Again, no problem with that. Those people have been supportive of this. Just a lot of the people out there didn't want to see that across the whole site. So what we came up with is let's develop, I guess, the left side of this to try to preserve the other side. So we tried to develop as least as possible to try to save the whole other side. And I'll get into that in a second. So there is some industrial use, I think, that people want. So we came up with 4 lots there to kind of save that, because it's a unique zoning around town. We squished it on the train track side and touching the other industrial site. The big ask is lot 5. So what we decided is, hey, instead of another industrial lot, let's try to solve some of this community problem with housing. So that's 30 units. We buffered it so you cannot see it from Edgewood. That's a really thick set of trees right there. You know, it's only 30 units. Like Whitefish Crossing is 60, so you know, it's not a very big footprint. And it's also a pretty cool place to live, we think. I mean, you could take the Edgewood out to Wisconsin on your bike, as Wendy said, through the whole east side of this, the east side of this side, we'll have a trail down to the dog park through the woods there. You know, it's kind of laid out good. Across the whole north side is going to be a bike easement. Now, the open space in the middle, you'll see there is deeded open space. Lot 6, and that's the only future, I think who asked that? Steve, was that you? That's the only future. And what we're telling you is we're going to donate that as a conservation easement or a park, and that'll be a future deal. We cannot add that as a condition on this application because there's no benefit if you do that, if it's a conditioned space. So we put it on there as future, and so we can't do anything with that lot without coming back to you, so you have some protection that we will do what we're saying. And we envision like a Viking Creek wetland preserve in there, touching the open space that is conditioned. It's a very thick set of woods, and you know, I've heard opinions that it's a great set of woods. I've also heard people think it looks awful. So I kind of think it's in the middle. It needs some restoration work because it's an old tree farm, but it is very cool in there, and I can see some trails, and that's our plan, is to make that a community benefit in there. So we can't do anything without coming back to you. That's why it's on there as future. So we will come back. Now, Rebecca, your thoughts from looking at those trees from the dog park, you cannot see lot 4. All you see is up there is all those trees is open space or future. So we're not, I don't think you need the buffer along 2, 3, and 4 like you said, because it's all the trees you can see. So that's the plan. On this side, I think, when you look at it from a whole, it's a pretty, developing, I guess, the west side kind of helps preserve the trees because it's a very rural, kind of cool area out there. If you want to go to the next slide, Michelle. So this is what got the neighbors kind of worked up when I talked to them. This was an old plan of that tree farm that was an approved industrial park. I don't know what year that was. It says vacated 2012, but it was a couple of years before that. But this could be all trees cut down. This was approved. It's vacated. But this kind of got all the neighbors worked up a little bit on how to preserve that area. So I just put it in there so you can see kind of what was past approval there. Go to the next one. This is the barge. Again, nothing wrong with this. This is an industrial use. We just didn't really want to see this across the whole 26 acres. Go to the next slide, Michelle. So these are some pictures of the trees. Obviously, everyone who's lived here has driven out there. They've seen them. I mean, it's thick. It's cool. Just needs a little restoration work. That's I guess the one on the left is the corner of the intersection there. And the other two, one is looking down Edgewood, and the bottom one I think is looking up second. If you want to go to the next slide. This is the multifamily workforce. And this has to go through architectural review. I just kind of want to show you kind of what we're thinking. Some kind of look like little barns, and they can be cool, even though you can't see them. We want to make them pretty cool. Go to the next slide there. This is kind of an aerial view. It shows that's the tree buffer there off Edgewood. So they're kind of hidden behind. You can see in the top there would be the industrial park. So they're pretty tucked away, but in the trees there. Go ahead, Michelle. So this kind of rolls it all back together, and you can kind of see it now as a whole, how it would work with the 8 lots on the side. The middle, we're trying to keep all as open space, and then I guess the west side is the 4 plus the multifamily. So overall, we're pretty happy with it. I mean, a lot of the neighbors worked with me on this. I mean, literally every neighbor across the street and I sat down with this. So we're pretty happy. A couple of the things that we'd like to talk about is, and we do have some trees pictures if you want to see them, Rebecca, from okay, I sent some pictures. This is today from the dog park, and this is looking at the trees. This is all in the area that is going to be part of the future. So you can take either one of these. I took these actually today. So all those trees you're looking at is the future lot 6 and the open space. So those are all staying. And there's another one there. So you cannot see those industrial lots from the dog park. But if you want to go back to the main pit, there you go. So we have a couple questions on the conditions on second. So right now it says a paved path through to I guess from the corner of Second and the train tracks to the multifamily. We'd like to make it paved along Second, but then over to the multifamily, I think we should, like a Viking Creek kind of like path. I don't know if we want it paved. That's just, it was written in there as paved, so, you know, we're just kind of thinking more of a natural path, which will match what we're planning through the, you know, if we do a conservation easement path. The other thing on Second Street is, what street do you guys want that to be? Because the neighbors didn't really understand that when they wrote all their support letters. They didn't quite understand. They're hoping that that's not a city boulevard with streetlights. And that, so the streetlights really got people kind of worked up when they found out about that. They don't really want, they kind of want the dark skies out there and a rural feeling. So that's the big thing that's, I think, conditioned right now, is it'd be a city street. I'd also like to see on the west side of East Second, the bike, I think it should just be a bike path all the way up to Edgewood, and then we have an easement across the north. So that makes the most sense to me. I don't understand the cash in lieu on the other side. You know, it's a condition. It's just, I guess if it doesn't seem like in the spirit of kind of we're trying to do there, but that's a condition too that didn't make much sense to me. But I'd like to see just a bike path on one side of East Second, and maybe get a way of the curb and gutters, or I guess it would be boulevard and streetlights, mainly streetlights. But I think that was it. I'm sure you guys will have some questions. But
We'll start with Ben.
Hey, Sean. So I wanted to ask you about Lot 6. That's the one, the future park or conservation easement. So you had mentioned that it was not included as a condition of the application. I was wondering if you could elaborate on why.
So if we condition that's going to be open space, there's no tax benefit for a conservation easement if it's included, because it's open space. So we'd have to go back to the drawing board and enlarge the left side if we did that. But I wanted to put it out there so you see what our plan is, and it says future. So that's the only thing that we're going to do with it. Is, you know, a park or a conservation easement. But if it's dedicated open space, then they don't take that as a conservation easement, because it's already open space. It's already been conditioned, essentially. And we've went round and round with the conservation group on that. It's kind of challenging. So that was the plan we came up with, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, so it's still hard to understand. What role do you see the city's involvement in that in the future?
I don't know if it's a conservation easement. I mean, like the Viking Creek wetland is my only experience. You know, Whitefish Lake Institute took that, and it's a third-party conservation deal. I don't know if there is a city role. Maybe it could be a city park potentially, but I'm not sure. We kind of just, it'll be a public benefit of some sort, either a park or a conservation easement.
So are you representing to us today that this lot will be either a park or a conservation?
It'll be a public benefit, yes. You know, it's got to be very careful if it's in the conditions that it's going to be open space. Yes, that's what I'm telling. That's why I wrote it on there.
Okay.
I mean, that's why I put it right on the screen so you can see it.
Right on. And what do you think about extending the sidewalk from the train crossing back to?
I was surprised to learn the city has not extended that themselves. I mean, it looks like you're close. I mean, it seems like that would be a city's job to connect to us if we're going to put ours in.
What if we traded you the sidewalk in lieu?
It's probably a wash. It probably is a wash, right? Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Further questions for Sean? Not seeing any, Sean. Thanks.
Sure.
And we will hold our public hearing now. Is there any public testimony this evening on these items? Steve? Yeah, you bet. Just name and address for the record, if you don't mind.
Yeah, my name's Steve Knox. I live at 1455 East Edgewood Drive. I've lived in Whitefish 30 years, the last 23 years out on East Edgewood, a stone's throw from this property. Just for the record, Sean hasn't sat down with me and discussed this. I did get a call from his brother. My biggest concern is that something Councilor Sweeney brought up, and John, you did too, about further subdividing those lots. And I just wish there was some way, we were talking about deed restricting and conservation easements, and just, we could have a pro-development council down the road, and this guy that owns the 15 acres decides to build a subdivision. I mean, it's AG 20 to the north, the south, the east, it's just AG 20 everywhere. And I would just really hate to see that get ruined. So if there is some way to propose an amendment, which I did discuss with Andy Fury a few weeks back, to really cement that those 5 to 15 acre lots stay that way, I would like to see that.
Yep.
That's all, thanks.
Thanks, Steve. You're welcome to comment, yes. Pam, right?
Yes, Pam Reeb, 1800 East Edgewood Drive. And I really appreciated your comments because I was very frightened about that thing that came up. And I was out of town when it came up. And where I live, that road has gotten so busy. When I moved here, it was an unpaved road. And then they paved it. And I used to think it was so cool to live on an unpaved road, but it was so washboardy, it was awful. And I'm from the city, so it felt better. But that road has gotten so busy, and so many people run off the road at my driveway, right there. As a matter of fact, a guy went off the road last week, crashed his new car into the tree, and a guy died there 3 years ago. But it's just the whole aspect of spaciousness and community and bike riding and hiking and walking and dog walking, and East Edgewood is pretty special, and how it connects to Columbia Falls and Half Moon and Tamarack, that whole area that I consider my home, and the dark sky, thank you for that. It's very important because once we start bringing more density into that side above the railroad tracks, where the intersection at Wisconsin and Baker and the whole traffic jam that happens when the ski resort lets out. And I take my kids to school every day, and it's just, I just wonder, like, these people, like, are we gonna helicopter our kids in at some point? Because the traffic in town is, I feel sorry for the people that live on East 2nd and 2nd and try to get to Muldown and try to get to the middle school and then the high school, and all the stop signs and stop lights and the way the traffic flows. It's just, this is a bigger complaint than just what's happening on East Edgewood and East 2nd. But my comment about the railroad tracks is, it's really something to sit there. Do you live there yet? No, because when the train stops and they're moving things back and forth, you can sit there for a long time. And my kids and I are like, okay, Mom, do we turn around and go back through town? And then you have to navigate going back over the viaduct, back down, Edgewood Place to Edgewood to East Edgewood to get home. It's crazy. It just makes me laugh. My other point was that, what is my other point? A lot of people bicycle on East Edgewood, and it would be so lovely to make it, it's a ditch on either side. It's an elevated road. I've slid off the road a few times and had to be pulled out. It's just, it's a little bit dangerous. But the increased traffic, and then the people that work, that might live there and go to Columbia Falls, I mean, it's a rat race on that road. I'm sorry, they did a traffic, y'all did a traffic study on there? Really? Okay. Well, it's just more density above the railroad tracks doesn't make sense to me in community planning because of all the traffic. And then the airport. Every day somebody flies over my house. Like, literally, they're just flying over my house, and I'm like, are they taking pictures? I'm just wondering what that's about. That airport's gotten busier. I don't know what the liability is there with having a community sitting right where people are building these big hangars at the airport now. I wish I was just here talking about, like, is my dock extending too far out into the lake? Anyway, I appreciate you letting me talk, and I really loved hearing, and I'm excited about your project. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam.
Okay.
Appreciate the comments. Who's next?
So when the developer came up, he mentioned the neighbors, I think, 50 times.
Name and address for the record, if you don't mind.
What's that?
Your
Oh, I'm
name
sorry,
and-
Sanvu, 739 2nd Street East.
Thank you.
So I'm a neighbor. Lots of people here have stayed very late for this meeting. Hi, neighbors. How many of you were contacted by the developer to get your input? Raise your hands, please. Got one. Did he talk to you? Okay. So we got a few people, right? And the neighborhood is more than just that little area. And then there's claimed benefits to the community. Can you throw up the map again of the whole area? So apparently there's access to public spaces and stuff like that. You notice the top part on Edgewood. There's no way anybody can walk into that area. On the southern part, who's going to send their kids across a railroad track? And then the fact that the developer is hesitant to even put a little strip of sidewalk to connect it, all that improvement that they claim for public use is no more than just a private amenity for that area. So there should be something a little bit more logical that benefits the whole community. And the people that are paying the price for detrimental harm are the people living in that area in higher traffic. And so they said they did a traffic study and then waved it off and said it was minimal, right? And said, okay, it's minimal traffic. What's the basis for that? They don't live there. 500 cars could be a big deal, right? And so right now, the claimed community benefits, I don't see, just because it's going to end up being just a private amenity for that area, because access to that area currently is very hard to get to, right? And even if you put a sidewalk in there, who's going to walk across this railroad track to go there when they can just walk across to dog park, the new park that we got? Okay? And then the other thing is, a lot of these developments, you talk to the neighbors and there's immediate people around there, but what about all the other neighbors who are impacted and are detrimentally harmed by this, and they get no compensation? So instead of developing those amenities, maybe you should try to think about doing something on Second to help to benefit the community members on that street who are going to be adversely impacted by the development. So I asked the council to reconsider all those supposed benefits. Is it really truly to the community, or is it going to be just amenities for that area? Thank you.
Thanks, Sanvu. Who's next? Further public testimony? Heidi.
I'm Heidi Van Everen. I live at 4 Pine Avenue. And I was just here for the other presentation. I thought I'd stay on because I'm interested, so I'm not as prepared as I should be. But I do think it is important to understand and make sure that you all think about the bike path connectivity, because the current trails are on the south and the east side where the dog park is. So having there be new trails proposed on the north and the west side, somebody's got to figure out how to connect those, and I'm not seeing it in here, but maybe I just am not prepared enough. But I do think that somebody should think about connectivity, and I'm looking out into the future thinking about East Edgewood and wondering, in the transportation plan that the city has, is everything on the north side of the road? Or is there a connectivity on the south side of Edgewood? And mostly thinking about the parcel on the east of 2nd Street. Isn't there value in the city retaining an easement to ensure bike path connectivity if things go, because I bike on Edgewood and it's dangerous because there's no place for you to go. And then the 500 day trips, I think, there's sort of a theme there of living and going back and forth out to Haskell and back into town, 500 new dray trips a day when the train is across the tracks for as many times as it is throughout a day. I question that impact and that assessment. So I think that's And thank you for presenting, because it was much easier to understand what's going on there with your slides and information. So appreciate it.
Thanks, Heidi. Further public comments? Michelle, anyone online?
Yes, we do have a couple people who have had their hands raised. For those who are attending by phone, please hit *3 on your phone pad to raise your hand. For right now, we will go with Gary. If you can unmute your mic and state your name and address, please.
Hi, I hope everybody can hear me. My name is Gary Gorian. I'm at 1489 East Edgewood, and I share a property line with the westerly portion of the proposed subdivision. I'd like to start actually by thanking staff who's been very responsive and detailed in answering my questions. I appreciate that very much, Wendy in particular. But I'd also like to take a minute to thank the applicant. Arguably, I have the biggest impact of anybody so far tonight because I live directly right next door. And Sean reached out to me. We had some very productive discussion. And I think that he was very generous and he was considerate of the issues that I thought would affect us. And he adapted the plan accordingly, and I appreciate that very much. The reality is we'd all like to see that stay as a field, but you know, it's not going to. And the concept of I'm in the boat, pull up the ladder, you know, in my opinion, that would likely lead to something much more intense in terms of usage in the future. So my hat's off to Sean and his partners for listening and being considerate in that respect. I'm basically a kind of a one-issue candidate here. For me, the concern is light pollution. And in my opinion, developing Second Street with any type of street lights, be they you know, sensitive dark lights or otherwise, it's really out of character for what we're trying to preserve, particularly to the north and the east of this property. So I would respectfully request that the city council delete that condition and move ahead otherwise with everything that's been presented tonight. I think on the westerly side, look, we have a housing shortage in this town. There's no question about that. And it's gonna go somewhere. And I think that this is a thoughtful plan and I'm supportive of it.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate your comments tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, Chaz, if you'd like to unmute your mic and please state your name and address, please.
And this right. This is actually B.
We're having a hard time hearing you, ma'am. I think you're muted.
There, good.
There you go.
Yeah, I agree with Gary. Was one of my concerns is the dark skies. And I would agree that if we could minimize street lights, that would be wonderful. The other issue I have is having a hard time believing the traffic won't be impacted because it's in the 30 years we've been out here. We're at 33 snowshoe flats. It's gotten pretty severe and I'm concerned about going over the viaduct, especially with all the traffic going to Big Mountain, that it's gonna affect that. And then partly because the train is often holding up the Second Street. I don't know if there's anything that Whitefish can do to ask the train not to stop there so often. I didn't know if that was looked into, just an idea. With that much more settlement out there. So, yeah, traffic is, I think, an issue, and I'd love to see the dark skies preserved as much as possible. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments.
Mm.
Mary, are you on the phone and do you want to speak towards this agenda item? You were muted, Mary. Did you want to speak towards this agenda item?
No, thank you though for asking.
Thank you. That's it, John.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council. As a reminder, we do need three separate motions. The first would be for Resolution 22-26, the second being Ordinance 22-13. That does require a supermajority vote of the council, so for votes in the affirmative for passage, and same with item 8B3, Ordinance 22-14, and I would take those individually. Steve.
Make a motion to approve Resolution 22-26, resolution indicating its intent to adopt a map amendment of the 2007 Whitefish City County Growth Policy as requested.
Thanks, Steve. Is there a second
I
to the motion?
second it.
Seconded by Giuseppe. Further discussion? Giuseppe.
I am, again, following the advice of the planning board. At the same time, I'm concerned not for this development, but for future safeguards about how obsolete our city growth policy is. 2007, we better get to work and revise it.
Steve.
I just want to say that, the first step in considering this whole thing is this resolution, and I think I'm in support of it. I just want to remind my fellow counselor that we do update the growth policy without updating the whole entire thing. There are many amendments to it that we've made since 2007.
Every 2 years. Further comments from the council? Ben.
Question of staff. Wendy or Dave, maybe this might be for you. The applicant has represented the large open space as being a future park or conservation area, but I see this as a very valuable community benefit, and I remain a little perplexed that it's not listed as such in here. What do you think?
So that would be with the PUD preliminary plat motion. This is the growth policy amendment motion first.
Okay, so we can have that discussion there. Fair enough. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. Further comments? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously, which brings us on to item 8B2, which is ordinance 22-13, and that again is regarding the rezone.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve ordinance number 22-13 as stated on item 8B second on the agenda.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Giuseppe, would you like to speak to your motion? Further comments from the council? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously, which brings us on to item 8B3, ordinance 22-14, and this again will be for the preliminary plat and the planned unit development overlay. Yes, sir.
Wendy, I found the map that I was looking at. It's on page 176 of the packet, where it clearly shows phase 1 and phase 2 of this project. I'm not sure what page it is in our packet. It was page 176.
Oh, yeah.
So is that an official delineation of a phase? Is that something that the developer comes up with? I think this helps to answer Ben's question a little as well. Because if it's a phase 2, and we're taking the developer at their word that this will be either donated to the city as a park or put in a conservation easement, and I'd certainly get the idea that, the tax benefit of doing that. Then it would have to come, if it's specifically a phase
truly
two.
a phased subdivision, but you know, I mean, all the improvements and everything will have been done. I mean, there's nothing that's particular to that lot. I don't know, maybe the applicant has something to, if Eric thinks, get the expert, this one's his.
Right. So, yes, this was very much intentional that we created a phase two that would have to come back to you guys if we did anything to it. If we developed it, subdivided it, anything other on that area 6 or lot 6, we would be coming back to you. And the intent is to, by the developers, is to utilize a conservation easement over that particular property. But when you work with a conservation entity, they're essentially using tax credits or tax incentives to purchase the development rights off that property. So if it's conditioned that it can't be developed, then there's no development rights to essentially sell or trade to that conservation holder. You've stripped those away, so there's no benefit then. And so the whole reason of proposing the conservation easement disappears, becomes moot. So in essence, where he would be giving something up for something in exchange, if you conditioned it, he would be giving something up for nothing in exchange. So that's the reason.
I totally get that. I just want to make sure that if it is a phase two, that it does have to come back before us if you change your mind about putting it in a conservation easement.
Yes.
And we have all this testimony now that you've said what you want to do with it.
That was the intent.
Okay, thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
Wendy, and this might be a question for other staff. The streetlights, the sidewalks on both sides and streetlights on both sides, I know that's a standard city thing.
Yep.
It's clear that, you know, I forget what we did on Texas. Did we just plumb it essentially for later streetlights, or did we put bollards there? I've forgotten.
I would say too that Texas is a little bit different. That's a city project where this is a development project. And
Okay.
when someone's coming in and doing a development project, unless they've asked for a subdivision variance, they meet all the city standards. There's been no variance requested, you know, from those standards. And if they are requesting a variance, if you find that maybe a variance is warranted, you have to make the findings that are in the subdivision regulations for a variance,
Okay.
which are outlined, and we can go through those if that'd be helpful.
Not if we
It's
don't,
like
if
the
we're not
hardship.
discussing a variance, I don't want to get into it right now.
Right, and so the reason for the fee in lieu of sidewalks on the one side is because our standard is you provide sidewalks on both sides unless it's not timely. Well, it's not timely right now to have sidewalks on the eastern side, so that's why there's the fee in lieu of sidewalks.
Okay. Is there anything preventing the developer from coming back and asking for a variance to those subdivision standards after the fact?
I think it'd be a little unusual. It'd be like an amendment to the application,
PUD.
kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Steve, I mean, that would be one of the deviations from the PUD that you could add as well, as because it's some of the deviations from the public works standards can be included in the deviations for a PUD as far as the streetlights.
But it's also a variance to the subdivision standards.
Now that we're clear as mud,
Yeah, I'm a little confused now too.
if some of us wanted to entertain the idea that we don't put in standard streetlights out there, how do we go about doing that?
Thank you.
I guess Dave must have a solution here for you.
I'm just going to interject here real quickly. I'd prefer to have a motion on the table for this item before we discuss amendments or deviations.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to move to approve ordinance 22-14.
Is there a second
I'll
to the motion?
second it.
Seconded by Councilor Cornell. Now you may proceed.
Now, I would offer a friendly amendment of some kind or character, if that will work, that we not require standard streetlights out on that section of East 2nd Street or in the subdivision.
I will second that in whatever form it comes back to us.
So you'll recall that they've already asked for a variance to have no streetlights within the subdivision itself on the private street side. On the western side, that is a public 60-foot right-of-way. There's 4 industrial lots, there's 30 multifamily. They were gonna build, the standard street light, standard city street with boulevards, street trees, street lights, sidewalks. It's a regular city street over there.
So the deviation would only be applicable to the lots east of East Second Street?
That's
the
the
8 lots,
That's the subdivision variance that they requested.
which I believe you're advocating to support.
Yes.
And you want to get rid of all streetlights in the entire subdivision.
If I had my
Is that what you
druthers,
said?
yes. but
The
I-
8 lots on the east side of East Second Street,
Right.
not the western portion of the development.
Which is already part of the request, is the 8 lots on the east side.
Okay.
The complaint from the neighbors, the concern that they're raising, is only on East Second Street.
Correct.
Between the train tracks and East Edgewood.
Right. Well, now, again, correct my understanding here. We're not requiring the developer to improve East Second Street and to put in
We
street.
are.
We are.
We are asking, because we want it's a city street, this property's all been annexed into the city. The intention is for it to match the street that's in front of the dog park with curb, gutter, street trees, and street lights. And with the increased traffic of that area, that's the recommendation that's coming from our Public Works Department.
And the sidewalk's only on one side of the street, on the south side of the railroad tracks, though. And it kind of ends right at the dog park.
Correct.
You can see it on Google Maps. And there's no lights down that far, are there?
I'll let Craig answer those questions. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Am I on now? No, this is on. Okay. So there are currently streetlights on East Second Street on the south side of the tracks. When we did that project in 2015, we did a shared use path on the south side of East Second Street and installed streetlights up to the dog park. East Second Street is a collector roadway, and so we are making a recommendation to staff that they improve East Second Street on the north side of the tracks to the city's collector roadway standards, which do include streetlights, curb, gutter, boulevard trees, and streetlights. We are adding a tremendous amount of traffic to that roadway, as well as a shared use path that will be used from a multifamily housing development, and so we are recommending it. Of course, council has gone against those recommendations on past projects. I would say at an absolute minimum, we should have the developer install the facilities to have future streetlights, be it conduit and bases for the streetlights, whether there be a fee in lieu for future poles, which cost about $3,000 a piece. I leave that up to council, but it definitely is staff's recommendation that this roadway be improved to collector roadway standards.
Let's start with the interior road system to the east of East Second Street. Is everyone in agreement that we can waive the requirement for standard streetlights per their request?
Yes.
And that's already memorialized in the
Part
application?
of their request,
Okay.
and staff and planning board agreed.
Did you
Yep.
say east or west side?
The east
The
side.
east side of East Second, the 8 lots.
Okay, yes, okay.
Then the second question would be, what's the council's position on adding streetlights from the railroad crossing north to East Edgewood as part of the streetscape reconstruction? Rebecca?
Go ahead.
I would really like to see streetlights there because I think these are such large parcels that are going to be established in the subdivision that they'll have dark skies. But I think a lot of people will be using this. We have a lot of families going to the dog park, and if that area gets developed into another park, I think it's going to be really important. We have very dark evenings after a certain period for many months, and I just think it would be safer and that we should follow the staff's guidance on this for safety reasons.
Thanks, Rebecca. Ben? Or, excuse me, Steve. You're there.
I'm okay with asking that they provide the bases and then some kind of fee in lieu, like Craig said, because, I mean, it's clear that it's dark out there and there's big lots out there right now. It's not like there's gonna be this huge rush of people out there because they build 60 or 30 units out there, so. And the other houses, that's not gonna generate a bunch of traffic into that park, so that's my, we need to plumb it correctly for the future is the way I look at it, but I don't think that it's necessary as a right now kind of thing.
I'll chime in. I would agree with Steve. I spend a lot of time out in that area. My friend owns the home on Armory, hangar home, and you can literally see the one power light at the railroad depot area, you know, the big tower lights, and one additional light. All the additional developments have all incorporated dark skies, you know, lighting as part of the new residential developments, and it's a very unique and quaint part of town that I personally don't feel warrants streetlights at this time. And so I would agree with Steve's comment about providing conduit basis for the poles and cash in lieu for future lights, but that's just my opinion. Rebecca?
That means we would have them put the poles in, but then we would gather cash so that if we decided to change it later, then we would get the cash from the developer. We wouldn't be paying it?
Cash in lieu means that we collect from the developer, but the poles actually wouldn't be installed, just the conduit and the bases.
Oh, okay.
And at a future date, if we elected to install the lighting, the cash is there to pay for the poles.
All right.
Would that have to be a friendly amendment, Wendy?
Yeah, or we
Added
could,
condition, or can we add that to condition number 7 regarding streetlights?
or is it condition number 14? East Second Street from BNSF train tracks to East Edgewood intersection must be improved to include
Okay.
curb gutter, streetlights, street trees on both sides.
So we would just need a motion to strike the requirement for the installation of the streetlights and adding the requirement to provide conduit basis for the poles and cash in lieu for future lights.
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second it.
Okay, so that's an amendment to condition number 14. We'll go ahead and vote on that amendment to condition 14 first before going to the original motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry on a 4-1 vote with Councilor Norton voting in opposition. So we've taken care of the street lights, excuse me. Ben?
I would like to offer a friendly amendment. My amendment would be to strike condition 15, which is the fee in lieu of sidewalks on the east side of 2nd Street, and instead to add a condition that says the developer must construct a pedestrian path from the railroad crossing to the nearest city sidewalk.
So we'll just replace the language in condition number 15 to that effect?
That would work.
Okay, is there a second to that friendly amendment?
I just want to call attention to the fact, that the existing sidewalk is on the south side of East 2nd Street, which would then turn into the east side of this development project. So there's going to have to be some crossing somewhere as well.
With a suitable crossing.
Okay, all right, so that would be added to the language with a suitable crossing.
That sounds good.
Okay.
So are you actually wanting to amend condition number 11 that talks about the 10-foot wide shared use path would be continued? Because it'd go through the open space, it'd be on the west side of East 2nd, and go across the train tracks and then connect, is that?
I don't know.
Because the fee in lieu, because we asked for sidewalks on both sides of roads, that's the standard, and if you can't provide a sidewalk, then we get a fee in lieu of sidewalks?
Sure. Yeah, whether it's a sidewalk or a shared use path, I guess I don't have any strong feelings. I just think there should be some pedestrian connection, one way or another.
You don't want to eliminate the ability of us to collect a sidewalk fee for the other side that can be used in future projects.
I thought it seemed like a fair trade.
Oh, I see.
The goal is to connect to what's already there.
Yeah.
Our city manager has a.
Could I just make a recommendation on that one? One thing to consider is with the cash in lieu, we also have other cash in lieu funds that we collect from developers for a certain district in our city. we do have funds available. If it really is, you know, a swap, as we're talking about, I think that it's generally accepted that the city would actually use those funds to connect to a new development. So that's the point of the cash in lieu, is to take those funds and connect sidewalks that aren't done at the time of development. So just consider that, given just the process and how cash in lieu works here, so.
Sure, my reaction to that though would be probably the most expedient way to have that path be created along with the apartment buildings would be to have the developer do it, would it not?
You know, we extend sidewalks throughout the city, and that is part of what we do where it's not developed. That's why resort tax was just voted to actually be able to extend sidewalks starting in 2025 also. So, you know, you could have the developer do it. And again, I don't know what the cash in lieu fee is and what the cost is. We'd have to get estimates on how that swap looks, but I mean, it's just a thought.
Motion stays?
Stick with it.
And is there a second to that friendly amendment?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilor Quinnell. And so Wendy, that would be amending condition number 11, correct? Or 15? Okay. So 15, excuse me. Further comment on the friendly amendment to condition 15? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry unanimously. Any additional amendments or added conditions? I had one. Under condition number 9, can we require that the development include bear-proof containers? Not just standard garbage receptacles.
I guess I'll let someone else answer that. I don't know what the current state of bear-proof container is. Is
So
it required for everybody? I thought
they are rolling out, so we already are going to have requirements for residential. This would actually be potentially considered a commercial property because of the density. But even so, they are still required to make sure if they aren't issued an actual bear container, they still have to keep it secure from bears. So they have to have, you see some of the bigger condos projects around here, they have like built fencing around it of some type to prevent bears from accessing. So they still have the same requirement as everyone else to keep garbage.
What about the single-family residences on the east side of East Second?
They will get a bear-resistant container.
I just
So it's
wanted to
just the
make sure it's
condos
covered.
that are a little bit different.
I'm comfortable with that. Finally, to Heidi's point, you know, thinking out to the future when we do extend our shared use path down Edgewood, would now be the time to add an additional easement on the north side of the east side of the property along Edgewood to provide for that future connection.
We talked about this quite a bit. We do have a 60-foot right-of-way. Well, it's the county, first of all. It's a county road. East Edgewood is. It's not a city street. We have a 60-foot right-of-way through there. It's just not built to the full 60 feet. And our Connect Whitefish plan ended at East 2nd Street. So the drawing that I put in my staff report just showed the loop. It didn't show any future connection. So, you know, it's our plan. They're meeting what our plan says. So that would be a little outside, I think, the boundaries of the plan. But there is a 60-foot
clearly a
right-of-way.
public benefit that would be realized with that. Sean, would that be okay with the developer? Okay, to provide that easement. So I would suggest that as an additional condition. Steve?
I mean, I don't know that it's necessary because it would be an easement to nowhere at this point. If you look on page 233 of the packet, it shows clearly the Connect Whitefish plan that loops around and it stops at East 2nd. So I don't know what benefit. I mean, it would just
I mean, it's a heavily used roadway.
Yeah.
I mean, for people traveling out to Haskell Basin and beyond, and it's a very popular cycling route, and you can't really count on the county to do anything about it.
Right, but it's all county from there on out. I don't know. I'd have no problem adding it, so I'll just be quiet.
No, I appreciate your input. Rebecca?
Totally agree. I think it's really unsafe on the roads out there, and if we're annexing anyways, we should take care of this. 'Cause we will be growing, you know.
Ben?
Me to move this?
Please.
I would move to add a easement to the north side, or on the south side of Edgewood, on the east side, on the side of the property east of 2nd Street, to allow for a future multi-use path.
Great, and I think that would be condition number 25. Is there a second to the friendly amendment? Or added condition, I should say.
I'll second.
Seconded by Counselor Sweeney. Further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. That passes unanimously, which brings us back to our original motion for approval of item 8B3. Further comments from the council? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously as well, Michelle. Thank you for your time this evening. Thanks for the public comment, everyone. We'll move on to item 8C, consideration of a request from Robert Ackerman for a conditional use permit to construct a guest house located at 387 Fraser Avenue, and the property is zoned WR2, which is our one-family residential district. Welcome, Nelson.
Thank you. Yes, so this is a conditional use permit from Robert Ackerman to build a guest house. The site's an existing single-family home, and it currently has a garage. So adjacent land uses are all residential, WR2. There's one WSR district adjacent to it as well. The property is 10,019 square feet and can be legally described as Ackerman sub, section 35, tract 31 north, range 22 west, lot 1. The utilities are provided by the city and all that. I didn't receive any public comments on the project, just a couple neighbors asking the more details, but no comments. So the review of findings of fact, the growth policy is, the area is designated as urban, and this proposal complies with the growth policy. It's consistent with urban uses. It's as a guest house. Compliance with regulations, all the setbacks, parking, height, and lot coverage are met and will be confirmed again at the time of the issuing of the building permit. The site is suitable for the proposed project because it has adequate land area, it meets all the standards for emergency access, and there are no environmental restraints on the property, no negative environmental impact. So the site plan is dealt with, and the design issues in the project meets the required parking, traffic circulation won't be impacted, and all the utilities will be placed underground. The availability of adequacy of public service and facilities. The public services and facilities are available and adequate for the guest house because everything's currently on site, and response from fire and police won't be affected due to the access. There won't be any traffic generation, more noise and vibration, dust, smoke, glare, heat, smoke, fumes, gas, odor. It's all consistent with residential use. So the neighborhood community compatibility, the structural bulk and massing is consistent with the neighborhood. It's a 24-foot, the maximum height is 24 feet. And as drawn, it is 17 feet 10 inches, so the bulk won't be an issue. The scale also is met, similar scale to other buildings in the neighborhood. So the project is compatible with existing uses of the neighborhood and is consistent with the design, size, and density of the area. It is recommended that the planning board adopt the findings of fact within staff report WCUP 22-22. That the conditional use permit be recommended for approval to the Whitefish City Council subject to the following conditions. The project must comply with the site plan submitted July 12th, except amended by these conditions. The one off-street parking space must be designated for the guest house, and 2 off-street parking spaces must be designated to the primary residence. All areas disturbed because of the road and utility construction must be reseeded. All on-site lighting must be dark sky compliant, and then prior to submitting the building permit, The property owner must provide the city a recorded copy of either a deed restriction or restrictive covenant that the guest house may not be used for rental purposes as the permanent residence for anyone employed in a home occupation or on the subject property, or as a short-term rental. And then the conditional use permit is valid for 18 months and shall terminate unless commencement of the authorized activity is begun.
Thanks, Nelson. Any question for Nelson on his staff report? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing, and we'll hold that public hearing now. Is there any public testimony? Michelle, how about online?
Anybody who's online, if you'd like to raise your hand towards this subject, please do so either by the icon at the bottom of the page or *3 on your phone. We're good.
Thanks. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion.
I would move to approve, I guess it's WCUP 22-22.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilor Caltabiano. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. I spoke to Craig at our break, and Craig, chime in here if I misrepresented our discussion, but I think it's our thought that we would like to have a motion to table item 8D to the September 19th meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I so move.
Is there a second?
And just as an aside, Mr. Mayor, if there's any opportunity for us to have a work session on this matter between now and then, I, for one, would most appreciate it.
I think we're pretty full for our next meeting. But duly noted, we can talk about it on the 19th. Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion carries unanimously as well. We'll move on to item 9. We have ordinance 22-15, which results from a motion to reconsider from the August 15th, 2022 meeting. The public hearing is closed, and it's ordinance 22-15, an ordinance rezoning approximately 31.171 acres of land, known as Track 3 of Certificate of Survey number 2440 in Section 1, Township 30 North, Range 22 West, Flathead County, Montana, from County SAG 5, Suburban Agriculture, to WCR, which is our county residential district, and adopting findings with respect to such rezone. Dave?
Yeah, I don't know how much of a summary you want. We went through this at the last meeting, but this is an annexation, and we need to change the zoning to a Whitefish zoning district. In this particular instance, the city's the applicant. We're changing it to the closest equivalent city zone. Right now it's zoned County Seg 5, and we would be zoning it to our city zoning WCR country residential. This did go to the planning board. They did recommend unanimously to approve it. At your last council meeting, you guys tried to vote to approve it, but you didn't have a supermajority. And so that did fail on a 3-to-1 vote. And you guys, later in the meeting, you voted unanimously to reconsider at this meeting. So staff does continue to recommend approval of this. We need to have Whitefish zoning on this property since it was in the county and it still has county zoning currently.
Thanks, Dave. Questions for Dave on his staff report, or can I have a motion, please? Giuseppe?
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve ordinance 22 I guess it's what, 15 now?
Correct.
Rezoning as is stated on our agenda on item 9A.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Davis. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. We'll move on to item 9B, consideration of a request from the Birch Hill Homeowners Association for a Whitefish Lake and Lakeshore protection minor variance to extend an existing grandfathered community dock 20 feet out to a total of 163 feet in length, and the project area is located on Parkway Drive. Dave?
Thanks. Michelle, can you bring that PDF I sent you?
Excuse me.
So yeah, this is a minor variance request. Went through the Lakeshore Protection Committee. This homeowners association that serves 29 homeowners has asked to just extend their existing grandfathered dock that exceeds 60 feet in length an additional 20 feet. So currently the dock is a 143 foot in length I-shaped dock with a surface area of about 700 square feet that extends into Monk's Bay, which has shallow mud flat for about the first 100 feet. It's the other PDF. That was the presentation from the applicant. You can have that one up. It's the one I sent you that just has the photos. So currently they have 195 feet of frontage. They're eligible for about 1,560 square feet of constructed area. So the variance is just to the section of the code that talks about due to the high potential for interference with public navigation and recreation, no dock shall exceed 100 feet in total length, including gangways, but unless the water depth at 60 feet is from low waters less than 4 feet in depth, it can't be moved to another location on the property. They might be able to extend it out to 100 feet, but not exceed that. Currently, there are several docks in that area that do exceed 100 feet in length that are surrounding it, which if this graphic comes up, you can see that the Wildwood Docks is about 217 feet. The next door neighbor, the Abels, is about 210 feet. Again, theirs is 143 feet, and then to the south, the Sheffield Docks, about 100 feet. In order to approve a minor variance, there's several things that have to be met. One of the ones is due to unusual circumstances, a strict enforcement of the requirements and standards would result in undue hardship. Currently, they do have an existing dock. I mean, it was grandfathered in, it was originally permitted. They got a permit at one point to replace it exactly as it was about 10 or 15 years ago. It does at 143 feet. The dock's only 3 feet 2 inches at low water. So adding an additional 20 feet would get them a few extra, probably another 6 inches at low water, which would enable them to at least park 2 more boats on there. There is a site-specific hardship because the current length of the dock does not achieve a level of 4 feet in low water conditions, and the dock has to extend over a mud flat. Additionally, neighboring docks are well over 100 feet to extend beyond that current mud flap. The second one is no reasonable alternatives exist which do not meet the standards. It does limit their ability to move the dock because of the mudflat location and where it's at. Dredging of the lake bed would not be permitted. They could change the shape of the dock to an E or an F shape to get more boats, but that would bring the dock segments closer to the neighboring docks. So there doesn't appear to be a reasonable alternative if they were to add additional 20 feet other than adding just one more segment of dock on there. The third one is granting the variance will not have adverse impacts on the lake or lakeshore in terms of the policy criteria. And so there's several criteria that you look at. Does it diminish water quality? It wouldn't do that. Would it diminish habitat or fish and wildlife? It wouldn't do that. Would it interfere with navigation or other lawful recreation? On this particular one, some of the neighbors have brought up concerns that adding additional 20 feet could impact navigation in that bay. And so that's something that you guys would have to consider. I don't think it would extend any further out into the bay than the docks around it, but that is something that could be a consideration. And based on that, in our staff report, we did find that that condition isn't necessarily met because that condition, it could interfere with navigation, wouldn't meet that criteria. So it's possible that would interfere with that. And so that's the one condition that isn't met, and because of that, staff did recommend denial of the requested Lakeshore permit to the Lakeshore Protection Committee. At that Lakeshore meeting, we actually had to meet twice because they didn't have a quorum the first time. But at the end of it, the Lakeshore Committee did unanimously vote to recommend denial of the application with a 5-0 vote. The applicant is here. They do have some compelling arguments of why that doesn't interfere with navigation, but I'll leave that guys up to you to make that determination.
Thanks, Dave. Is the applicant present tonight? Would you like to provide some comments? Sorry for the late hour. You picked the wrong meeting.
Thank you for sticking with me. So, Michelle, I'm going to ask just that we show the same deck. So if you could just move to, excuse me for just one moment, at slide number 2, and this will, the next one, sorry. Yes, this is it. So what we're showing here is our project, and I realize after sitting through the last few hours, 80 inches by 20 feet isn't overwhelming, but this is the minimal project that we have launched, forward on. We started this project about a year ago, meeting with the city, looking at different alternatives, and we come to you, as expected, to ask for this minor variance to enhance the use and safety of our dock by adding 20 feet nearly out into the water. If we could move to slide number 3, Michelle. So this just provides some context. This is where we're located, just off of Wisconsin. As Dave mentioned, it's a subdivision of 29. We've been there many, many years. And we do have a community park, fortunately, that is part of the overall HOA ownership and is on the waterfront here. If we could see slide 4, please. So this provides a little bit more context for us. You can see, our dock is out there, 143 feet, 93 feet, Marcia Shuffles directly to the west, and the Able dock at 210 feet. If we can move to the next one, Michelle, because I think this next one, please. I think this actually might be an older slide. Is that, please, next one? So here's some information. I hope this is the correct slides. If not, I'll direct you to your packet. But this shows the distances between the docks. This is all taken from Google Earth or measured on site. You can see between the Able dock and our dock, it's about 100 feet, 110 feet. Between Shuffle's dock and our dock, at closest point is 65 feet, 80 feet end to end. And then that orange ray that goes through, that's the direct navigational line to the northeast. If for some reason somebody wanted to go past our dock, and this shows the extension modeled with the red box or the red outline box, you can see that it's well behind even a tight navigational path. And so we don't believe, based on our analysis, and I'll show you more, that we actually interfere with navigation. There are other things that are much more impactful than navigation. Michelle, could you please move to the next slide? Okay, next one, please. Okay, I think we are actually in the wrong deck. So I'm going to shift gears and direct to your handouts, because in your packet on page 712, maybe if you could present that, Michelle, is that possible? Okay. On 712 is actually, the analysis that we presented most recently. So it's another one of the satellite pictures, and please let me know if you're seeing that on your computers or your screens.
Got it.
Okay. So what this shows is, again, the situation. And what we're presenting here, instead of that orange line, is this notion of a navigational corridor. What defines a navigational corridor? Again, this is primarily important during low water levels. Most of the time, all the docks in the area navigate out into Monks Bay directly from the end of their docks. They don't have to pass by the Birch Hill dock. The only time they would need to pass by the Birch Hill dock is if they want to take the shortest line to the gas dock at the lodge. At low water, a lot of people will come through here because there is, some sandbars, which, we'll talk about here in a moment. But this navigational corridor, which, as I noted, is 170 feet wide, this is what we're really talking about, as being, an open space that all boats can, come in and out of our portion of Monks Bay without any encumberment from our dock. So as you can see, with the red circle on the right-hand side, again, I've mocked up the extension. You can see on this direct line, which is as close as you would want to come, we're 20 to 30 feet away outside of that navigational corridor. The only way a boat would have any kind of interference from us is if they veered 30 feet in from that navigational corridor. So we don't believe that's a very likely occurrence. Yes?
Just speaking to the mic.
Okay, I'm sorry.
If you don't mind, just for the record.
Yep. So what establishes that with that the navigational corridor? It's two features. One, it's the Able dock at 110 feet. And then opposite that, about 190 feet away, is this thing called the Big Rock. Everybody in our neighborhood knows it. We go out there, it's a big rock, and you don't want to run into it in low water with your boat, that's for sure. But again, kind of back to the point, there's this 175-foot corridor between all the docks adjacent to us and the north part of Monks Bay, and our extension would be 20 to 30 feet out of it. If we move now to slide 713, we just mocked it up again and applied our navigational corridor overlay to another analysis that one of our neighbors provided. This was their evidence that there would be a navigational impingement based on our extension. So when we put the overlay of this navigational corridor under their slide, you can see, their worst case navigational path, to use another term, is well inside of our corridor. In fact, it's probably 40 feet from the end of the extension. So again, we don't believe that there is this risk of, interfering with navigation as stipulated by the statute. Okay, so the last slide I would like to point to is slide 711 in your deck, page 711. And it's just a summary. Does the extension interfere with navigation? So the policy criteria for issuance of a permit says it must interfere either during construction or use with navigation or other lawful recreation. We think our analysis with the navigational corridor, shows that that's not the case. We actually exceed, I think, the policy criteria. Upon inspection of some of the analysis provided by, the neighbors who we certainly appreciate, it seems like their analysis concurs. They don't agree, and we kind of all agree to disagree, but there is no other analysis provided by any other party in this request that shows there's impingement. In fact, I asked Dave at the last meeting that we had if the city had other analytical tools or other data to show that there was a navigational issue with our extension, and he said no. Maybe there is today, but I don't believe so. And so the dock extension is outside of this path that's set by other objects, not by the HOA dock. It's the Able dock and the Big Rock. So we're outside of that. We don't even impact that with our extension. And so we respectfully request that the board supports this in our minor variance and allows us to put the 20-foot extension onto our dock.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Appreciate the analysis. Cole and Marcia, do you have anything to add? Just or
I don't know whether to say good evening or good night. Sorry. Marcia Sheffels, 450 Parkway Drive, Whitefish. I'm going to stick right to my script so I don't get offbeat. With over 700 pages in your packet, I thank you. I just can't imagine the work that you have to do, and I appreciate it very much, and I appreciate the city staff for all the work they have done on behalf of all of us. I am a strong advocate of the Whitefish Lakeshore protection regulations, just to get that out of the way. I am speaking in opposition to the Birch Hill Homeowners Association request for a variance to extend their existing 143-foot dock. My family is an adjacent landowner to Birch Hill. I have the unique position of facing the Birch Hill beach and dock, and I see it on a daily basis, unlike the majority of the Birch Hill homes, and I live there year-round. Please consider that two experienced bodies, the City Planning Office and the Whitefish Lakeshore Protection Committee, have recommended denial of this variance. Water depth and mudflats are a problem for all of us. At the end of our dock, 43 feet shorter than the Birch Hill dock, and now with two motorboats at late season, our dock is just a little over 2 feet at the end. There is no doubt in my mind that approval of this permit on your part would set a precedent for other dock extension requests in an already crowded Monks Bay. There is a claim that Monks Bay and our particular corner are not a safety issue by U.S. Coast Guard data. That is comparing apples with oranges. Crowdedness in Monks Bay is a safety concern. I personally have seen, and bear with me, paddle boarders, kayaks, canoes, windsurfers, bladder boats for wake surfing, parasailing, battery-powered jet boats, ski boats, sailboats, pontoon boats, inflatable trampolines, flyboards, jet skis, motorized surfboards, tubing, and more. So it's busy, and therefore it can be dangerous. Last but not least, the existing grandfathered non-conforming dock of 143 feet is based on a 1954 survey of the property showing much more lake frontage than in reality exists. Topography has changed. A new survey of the Birch Hill Community Park should be required before any changes are approved. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcia. Further comments from adjacent neighbors? Hopefully keep the comments fairly brief. It's getting late.
Yes, it's past my bedtime. Cole Abel, 355 Lost Coon Trail, Whitefish. And as Judy mentioned earlier, my family does own property to the north of Birch Hill, and they've owned that property for over 90 years. I'm here to talk about one particular aspect of the Whitefish Lakeshore and Lakeshore regulations, which, by the way, are rapidly approaching 50 years old. During my tenure on the Lakeshore Committee, one of the most common arguments against the regulations that I heard was the infringement on personal property rights. Now, are the regulations perfect? No, by no means. But in my opinion, they do a very good job of balancing personal property rights with the protection of our lake and lakeshore. This particular variance, however, is a little bit different because it's not the property itself, but the neighbors that have their rights perhaps being infringed upon. So let me first say that I really do wish that all 29 homeowners in Birch Hill could have a boat slip on the lake. But that would create a navigational and safety nightmare, and realistically, there simply isn't any room for that. So I also want to point out, and one of the reasons I came here tonight to speak, is that I'm very upset by the Birch Hill Homeowners Association assertion that my family and I claim to own the lake bottom below the low water mark and that our property extends far into the lake. That simply is not true. I have never stated, written, or even thought about such a thing. It is ludicrous and it is very upsetting. So what is this all about? In my opinion, it's about riparian boundaries. So Montana state law, more specifically Montana Code annotated 75-7207 states, the requirements of 75-7208, which are factors favoring issuance of permit, are minimum requirements and do not restrict local governing body from adopting such stricter or additional regulations. So thus, about 50 years ago, the municipality of Whitefish and Flathead County got together, did the Lakeshore regulations, and yes, they are stricter than what are stated in the Montana law. Also, I want to state that the riparian boundaries are not inherent to Whitefish Lake or other navigable bodies of water, but they're other bodies of water in Montana and throughout the U.S. use very similar rules. So I guess the question, I know that two of you have been on the Lakeshore Committee, but what is a riparian boundary? The definition in the Lakeshore regulations state it is a projection, which is a line, of the side property lines from their point of intersection with the perimeter of the lake at the mean annual high water mark lakeward at right angles to the natural shoreline. So very simply, it's where the property line meets the high water mark and you project a straight line out into the water that's perpendicular to the shoreline. Very simple concept. So why is this in the regulations? Basically, It is protecting the neighbor's right of clear access to the lake from their property. It is so a neighbor cannot moor a boat, have a trampoline, a shore station, or a dock in front of their neighbor's property. For instance, there was a picture on here that they showed earlier of all the docks. Without the riparian boundary regulation, our 210-foot dock that faces almost directly west, we could move it 70 degrees to the south, almost come in contact with the Judy Petinatos, and then the Sheffels and the Birch Hill people would not have access to the rest of the lake. Without that riparian boundary, you know, people would be able to do this, as ludicrous as it is, and you know, that's why that regulation is in there. So I just want to say that currently, as the Birch Hill dock sits at 143 feet, they are in violation of the riparian boundary setback as is. Adding 20 more feet exacerbates their infringement. So please deny this request. Thank you, and thank you for your dedicated service to our community.
Thanks, Cole. Further comments?
Thank you all for your time tonight. I will be brief. I'm Kitty Curtis. I live at 1267 Birch Hill Drive. There was a comment that at low water, the end of our dock average is 3.2 feet. Today, it is 3 feet. And this is in a year when we had record water in Whitefish Lake, 2 months ago? And we are now down to 3 feet. There are 2 spaces for boats on our dock right now, and that is the 2 sides of the front of the dock. At the back of our boat, which is at the front slot on one of the sides, the water depth is 22 inches. So you can see 29 property owners, and we have at this time of year, and probably for about the last month, space for 2 boats for those homeowners. The one other thing I want to mention is that most of us who live in Birch Hill are, shall we say, we've been around for a while. We are thrilled that we now have probably a dozen children under age 10 in our neighborhood, and they love to use our beach. I think one of the things that you saw in your packet was a picture that one of our homeowners submitted of their children jumping off the dock into the water. They can't do that now with 3 feet of water at the end of the dock, and haven't been able to do it for a number of weeks. And we would just like to extend our dock for a minimum of 20 feet. This isn't the time to litigate whether we need a new survey or whether there's some riparian rights that we in Birch Hill have never heard of before. But we would like to give the 29 homeowners, longtime Whitefish residents, the opportunity to make reasonable use of our lake access. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Kitty.
Paul Flanagan at Birch Hill 1220, and I'm one of the people with kids that are running around making noise and stuff. And I'm not a boat owner, but I am standing behind the extension of the dock for lots of reasons. I don't, I'm the one that has the kids in the water. I don't see an increased
for 20 feet causing any more danger to the area. People swim, people paddleboard, they use the water. There's not 29 homeowners looking to add their boat slips like the surrounding communities. It's just a few more people from what I understand, and this will enable at least 2 more boats. It's not a, it's unreasonable ask. It's a different thing. We're right next to a 200-foot dock, and it's nice, it's great. If it was shorter, you'd want it longer to get past this mud flat area. There's a unique, condition that exists in this little corner of Monks Bay, and that we're not trying to have everyone start submitting requests and take up your time with this. This is what you're here to do, is to regulate and limit this. It doesn't mean everyone's going to start asking. I mean, it's their right to. They can ask. But I don't think it necessarily leads to the end of the world or concepts of we're all going to have docks that meet in the middle, that kind of thing. It's, we're talking 20 feet. And that's all I have. Thanks for staying.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments tonight.
Stu Stadler, and I live at on Birch Hill. Just one comment. The denial by the planning board was potential interference with navigation. You have not heard one word how it would interfere with navigation. It should be approved. It's 20 feet. It was basically so people can swim, can jump off the dock, dive off the dock. If we added 2 more boats, there's been times there's been 4 boats there, but it's never, you couldn't put any more than 4 even if we add 20 feet. But it should be approved. It doesn't interfere with anybody. And as far as riparian rights, we're not violating anybody's riparian rights. Riparian rights don't give title to property. They just give access to the lake, which we should have the same access that everybody else does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is TJ Harris. I live at 1220 Wisconsin Avenue. I'm just going to say that I am in favor of us getting the extension. I'm sorry that this has become an acrimonious situation with our neighbors. I don't think that Cole's family and Marsh's family were the developers of Birch Hill back in the day, and I don't think this is what their view of what should have happened in the neighborhood. And like I said, I'm sorry that it seems to have become acrimonious, but I do think that we have a reasonable request for our 20 feet. Thank you very much for your service.
Thanks, TJ. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to the council for a motion or discussion, whatever you'd like to begin with. Preferably a motion one way or another, either affirming the planning board's decision or going a different direction. Rebecca.
Make a motion to deny the Birch Hill Homeowners Association request WLV 22-W08.
Is there a second to the motion?
Purposes of discussion, I'd be happy to second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Rebecca, comments?
Mostly just that I trust the Lakeshore Protection Committee and our planning staff on the decision-making. It doesn't seem like much, but even the homeowners were mixed on this, so I'd rather be cautious in Monks Bay.
Further comments from the council? Do you need more time for this, or? Well, you always have the option to postpone to the September 19th meeting. Dana, is that a pretty full agenda as it stands? It's just getting late, and good decisions aren't really made at 10:40 at night after meeting for 4.5 hours, so
Yeah.
certainly your prerogative to postpone.
Give me 1 second. I mean, we've added the transportation plan. I don't recall it being a heavy
Okay.
agenda at this point. I haven't gotten it up, but I'm just gonna give you that
Okay,
for a variance.
just an option, given the hour. Or you can just withdraw your motion if you'd like, and if it's okay with the second.
I will withdraw my motion
And then would you propose to postpone to the September 19th
and
meeting?
will propose to extend to the September 19th meeting.
Further comments? Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it. Is the public hearing closed?
There is no public hearing on this.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Seconded by Counselor Quinnell. I will say, I sat on the Lakeshore Committee back in 1997 through 2002 or so, and Marcia and Cole, I heard some fairly convincing evidence this evening, personally, about how this may not affect navigation, which was one of the major claims. At the same time, I find myself in a quandary because we typically always do support our planning staff and, of course, the planning board that are advisory to the council, but just my personal opinion based on the information that was presented tonight. So with that said, is that feedback? Okay. Further discussion, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion carries unanimously to postpone. And we'll see you in a couple weeks. We'll move to item 9C, consideration of request from DNS Pearl Family Trust for a Lakeshore minor variance for dry stone steps, dynamic beach gravel, a Lakeshore permit for repair of a retaining wall, and stone steps located at 298 Skiles Place. And this comes as a recommendation for approval for the variance from the planning board. Dave.
Yeah, Michelle, can you bring those photos up? It's the same one that from the last one, but the next couple slides. So this is a request for a minor variance to construct 2 of 6 dry set stone steps attached to the rear entry door of a house to be 6 feet wide instead of the required 4 feet. And then a minor variance for a one-time dynamic beach gravel placement below mean high water, which would exceed the gravel size and cubic yard limitations. The application also includes a standard Lakeshore construction permit to level and repair stones in the existing patio, repair some stone stairs that go down to the beach, and then add a handrail for safety purposes to go down to the beach. So same kind of a thing. It's a minor variance, so we have to kind of look at the same criteria. Just posted some site photos on this property just so you can get an idea what it looks like with regard to along the beach front, and then the retaining wall that's very old and starting to fail a little bit. Again, there's existing stone patio and stacked stone retaining wall. And that property also has an existing dock and a buoy that was permitted. They're just looking at some dynamic beach gravel application to sort of address some of the scouring that's happening at the base of the wall, and then some minor repairs to the existing rock work. And then the staircase is extremely steep. I mean, I felt sketchy walking up and down it, and I know that the property owners probably do too, so I think they want to do some repairs so that is at least safe to get up and down. It definitely doesn't meet building code rise and run for the staircase currently, but adding a handrail will help that. They have 78 feet of lakeshore frontage. They're eligible for 624 square feet of constructed area. It does exceed that. They have 952 square feet. Exceeds the allowable constructed area by 328 square feet. This proposal will not be adding any new constructed area, but there's some, again, the back door you can kind of see on that photo. They want to add some, just a set of steps off of that, and because it's completely in the lakeshore protection zone in that area. The requirement is the path can only be 4 feet wide, and then they want it to be 6 feet so it covers those patio doors, so you can step out and not have one long step off one of the edges. Kind of covered all of the aspects of this. When it comes to the variance, we have to look at those same criteria. You know, would it result in undue hardship? Again, it was built grandfather right up to the 20-foot Lakeshore Protection Zone boundary, with an existing stone patio outside the back door, which is mostly within the Lakeshore Protection Zone. They did remodel the interior of the house, but the footprint has stayed the same. So looking at that, it does have an undue hardship just because of the location of the existing house being all, just out the back door is completely in the Lakeshore Protection Zone, and the need to safely access the house and maintain a retaining wall that's being undercut by wave action. There really aren't any other alternatives. Once upon a time that this property did ask to remove that entire retaining wall, and then add some fill in there to have it slope down to the beach, and that was denied by the Lakeshore Protection Committee and the council at the time. So in order to maintain that retaining wall, it is necessary to protect it and then provide some additional safe ingress up into the property. It doesn't diminish water quality, diminish fish habitat, doesn't interfere with navigation or create a public nuisance. It's maintaining the scenic value since it won't be really impacting or changing the retaining wall or the stairs or alter the characteristics of the shoreline. So there's no impact environmentally or to navigation. In fact, the dynamic gravel beach will probably help improve some of the ecological aspects of that beach. So based on that, it does meet the criteria for a variance. We did recommend approval of this to the Lakeshore Protection Committee. They met on June 13th, and following staff's presentation, they unanimously voted to recommend the council approve this on a 5-0 vote, and the applicant is here to add additional information or answer questions.
You want to just wait in case there's any questions? Okay. Council? Any questions for Kurt? Or can I have a motion, please?
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the request from DNS per Family Trust for a Whitefish Lake and Lakeshore Protection minor variance as stated in item C of the agenda.
That was to approve the variance?
To approve, yes.
Okay. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion carries on a 4-0 vote with Councilor Norton temporarily excused. Kurt, sorry you stayed around all night.
Thank you, Council. I appreciate your time.
Okay. I wanted to give you an opportunity to say something.
It's an extension of Bailey Lakeshore next door, which is performing well.
I'd love to see it. Next time you're out there, let me know. Yep.
I'll take photos.
Thanks, Kurt. Yep. We'll move on to item 10, consideration to reject the construction bid for the Grouse Mountain parking lot project. You have Craig's report included in the packet. Craig?
Yeah, I think I can give you the super quick cliff notes, but both of these are time sensitive. So the Grouse Mountain parking lot was in the budget for last year. We bid it back in July, and it came in considerably well above the engineer's estimate and what we had budgeted. So I am recommending rejection of that bid. So I recommend a motion from council to reject the bid from Cutting Edge Excavation in the amount of $189,898.
Thanks, Craig. Can I have a motion to that effect?
I move to reject the construction bid for Grouse Mountain parking lot.
And I second it.
Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Michelle? And we'll move on to item 10B, which is consideration to apply for Safe Streets and Roads for All grant and a railroad crossing elimination grant. Craig?
Yeah, so I can make this one quick as well. There are two grants that staff has identified as being lucrative for the city to move forward with. The first one, it's part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. It's the Safe Streets for All grant, and this grant currently has up to $6 billion anticipated to be awarded in the next 5 years. The Safe Streets for All grant is essentially used to move forward the goal, kind of the Vision Zero goal of 0 deaths, 0 serious injuries. What we're proposing for this project is to develop what's called a Comprehensive Safety Action Plan. And so once we develop that plan, we'll then be able to move forward with future Safe Streets for All construction projects. The second grant is the Railroad Crossing Elimination Program. And this one was actually brought to us by BNSF that would like to essentially complete an application on behalf of the city. The Federal Rail Administration has about $18 million in funding for planning projects for this railroad crossing elimination grant. And so what we're looking to do is work with BNSF to identify ways to potentially create a new grade separated crossing or do other crossing improvement projects at some of our existing rail crossings. As I mentioned, BN would be completing this application on behalf of the city with the help of HDR. So there's no financial commitment there. In terms of the application, the city staff would be doing the Safe Streets for All. So at this point, really only staff time for that one, but we have identified staff resources to complete that. Both of the grants would have a 20% match. So should grant funds be awarded, we would have to budget in a future cycle for the city's match, and BN has preliminarily offered to cover the bulk of that moving forward. So I think both of these are excellent opportunities for the city, and I recommend council pass a motion directing staff to submit applications for the Safe Streets for All grant and the Railroad Crossing Elimination Grant.
Thanks, Greg. Frank?
I would move that we apply for the Safe Streets and Roads for All grants and railroad crossing eliminations.
And I second it.
Seconded by Councilor Caltabiano. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous as well. Michelle, thanks very much, Craig. Dana, anything to report on between August 31st and September 6th?
Well, today, if you haven't noticed, we have a new person at this desk here. So we welcome Lainey for hanging in tonight with us. She actually just got to town this morning. Drove from Missoula, so it's been a long day for her.
We need to get her home.
Yeah, but we are so happy to have her on board, working through onboarding process, but it'll be great. So that's the first great news that I have of the night. Just the only other update, so that you guys are aware, Marissa Getz did resign from her position as our housing coordinator. We are getting that job posted as soon as possible, and we are working with our consultants to make sure that we continue through this housing refresh process without a step missed. And so we're happy to have Alan on board as our long-range planner. He's stepping in and filling those shoes with Marissa's leave. So we do have a housing refresh meeting next week, and we had an open house last week that had good attendance. 30 to 40 people showed up, and we also had about 59 people respond to the online open house survey.
Good.
That's all I have.
Thanks, Dana. Any questions for Dana on her staff reports or other matters? We'll start with councilor comments. Giuseppe, would you like to start tonight?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I ran because I believe in and trust the timeless protection for all of us of our country's democratic process. Tonight, I've been disappointed by the actions of the elected leadership of our city, of which I'm part. I have witnessed a disregard of our own laws, Whitefish City Code Section 1-6-3, first and 3, which recites, quote, "The City Council shall avoid those jurisdictional areas, A, which do not affect Whitefish citizens differently from citizens statewide or nationally. B, which do not have any observable impact on or relevance to the city itself, its services, utilities, infrastructure, properties, programs, or projects, or C, which other elected or appointed representatives are, but their experience and or authority best positioned to consider and take action," end quote. Finally, Mr. Mayor, before you sign it and ratify it officially, I would have the staff check and correct the word effect into affect, which I think was the spirit of your proclamation, on the last sentence on page 33. Thank you.
Thanks, Giuseppe. Steve? Frank?
In contrast to my colleague, I could not have been prouder of this body and the councilors who felt that it did in fact and does in fact affect and impact our community in particular. given the numbers of people that are involved in the healthcare positions in this town, the businesses and the service providers that we have in this town. I think it very much reflected this community's openness and inclusiveness. And again, I could not have been prouder of us. And so I was quite moved by it, and I thank us for doing it. That's all I got.
Thank you, Frank. Ben?
Nothing yet, thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Rebecca?
One of the surprising things about being on council is that we do a lot of things behind the scenes that the public doesn't know about because they don't really, it's not that it's a secret, but one of the things that we do is we do contribute to the body of law. And this is one of those situations where we, in cooperation with our attorney, decided to move the body of law forward by declaring what we think is right for our community. People say things like we're not faith-based or whatever, but in reality, we are responsible for the health and safety of our constituents. And so by not speaking up when we think we're off track, I think we're not doing a service to the people that live here. So we don't know where this will go, but it's important when we need to correct something that we think has been done to possibly harm people. I think it's really important to stand up for what we believe in. So thank you for those of you that supported this. As the only woman on council, it was really important to me because of the safety conditions that some women will find themselves in the future. So like Frank, I'm proud of our community for always standing up for civil rights too. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. My only comment, Giuseppe, with all due respect, is I will always default to our city attorney when questioning our legal standing when we operate up here as a council. And by no means was anything brought to my attention that we did anything unlawful. And if we had been doing something unlawful, Angie certainly would have told us well in advance. So I always defer to our city attorney for these matters, not outside legal opinion. And I would encourage you to do the same. With that said, we are adjourned.